eSeries from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This is DriversEye Live. My name is Brendan. I'm very happy to be with you all for the final time on Wednesday nights during sort of this coronavirus shutdown period. I'm joined tonight by Joseph Mudrak, as always on production. Hello, Joseph.
Hey, Brendan.
And, of course, by Scott Michaels, driver for Vulcanhorse Motorsport in the digital NLS, the BMW Z4. Happy to have you along, Scott. Welcome.
Good evening, Brendan. Good to be here.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, this is round 5. It's our season finale. We've been at this for the last 6 weeks. We had the preseason at Okayama back in April. We raced through pretty much all of April on Wednesday nights, same time. We had all kinds of chaos and incident, and it's been a really entertaining few weeks. But Road Atlanta last week, I think, was sort of the first time everybody got their feet under them, and we saw some really, really excellent racing. And I think it's primed us really well for our season finale tonight at Indianapolis. It's the Formula One layout, more or less. Scott, you've done some laps in iRacing, obviously plenty of experience in the GT3 cars. What's your take on the combination for our season finale tonight?
I think it's really great. It's definitely something where the drivers can really build on the quality of racing we saw last week, because this is a track with a lot of combination corners, so it's a real racer's track. It's something where you can set up the driver in front of you if you're trying to make an overtake and maybe like 3 corners later get them. More so than Road Atlanta, because you don't have to deal with the elevation, the bumps, the crazy curbs, the blind corners. This is a more simple track from a hot lapping standpoint, but something that can be more complex if you're trying to race someone who's a very similar pace to you. So it'll be interesting to see if the high quality of racing from last week carries over and we get to see a lot of that sort of thing, or if we return to the carnage of Blind Rock. But I'm confident that I have confidence that we're going to see something pretty cool this week, and we'll see a really good showdown in the championship.
We start our qualifying session tonight, as always, 3 laps, 10 minutes, and that'll set the grid for race 1. We ride on board with Nick Rowland at the moment. We've been following the championship battle since roughly week 2, and it's been actually really exciting. We'll get to that in a moment. Nick Rowland, of course, Audi driver, Alex Gomes, the Mercedes driver. Before we get too far into qualifying, strengths and weaknesses for each of the cars?
Typically, it's interesting because both manufacturers will tell you the other one is better on the straights. I think it kind of depends where iRacing is on BOP at that exact moment, but I think the Mercedes has really good mid-range and the Audi has really good top end. On this track, they should actually end up being pretty equal as far as straight lines go. The Audi is known as being a little bit more snappy, whereas the Mercedes struggles maybe with longer medium speed corners. We don't have a huge amount of medium speed corners. They're mostly sort of low to mid speed corners on this track, so that should suit the Mercedes, whereas the snappy Audi might struggle on direction change a little bit more. But it's really, I think it should be fairly even this time. And less advantage to the car that I would always recommend, the BMW, but we haven't got very many of them anyway. The Ferrari is the fastest car in a straight line, and we only have one, I believe. That will be Max Calder, who's typically been an Audi driver, so he's presumably looked at the top speeds, because obviously we do have that enormous straight off of NASCAR track, IndyCar Turn 1.
It is also a NASCAR track, to be fair.
It is, but it isn't. I mean, it's called Indianapolis. The clue's in the name. But yeah, at the end of the long straight is going to suit the Ferrari big time. So whether that means it's quickest overall, I'm not sure, but that'll be interesting to see what Max Calder can do with that top speed.
It's Nick Rowland's first lap. We follow him around through the S's that lead onto that long front straightaway you were talking about. One of the few opportunities we get the GT3 cars as fast as we do, 170 miles an hour down that long straightaway and into the braking zone at the 90-degree Turn 1. Turn 1, incidentally, is a much more gradual corner than the modern IndyCar layout. So it's not quite as obvious a passing zone. Nevertheless, you draft for 20-something seconds and get up to 170. You're going to find an opportunity to beat somebody on the brakes on the way into there. Nick Rowland's first lap, a 1:25.678, a couple tenths off what he did in practice, but he's still over half a second quicker than Reed Sweeney there in second. Alex Gomes into third, 1:26.307. He's our second championship player tonight. Gavin Bailiff in fourth, 1:26.6, and Driscoll now falls back to sixth in the high 1:26s, and then it's a mix of 1:27s and 28s below them.
Not a lot in the way of incident points so far in the session, which isn't surprising really. As I was saying before, this isn't a particularly technical track from a hot lap perspective, so I wouldn't expect a lot of people to be screwing up their laps. There's very few places where you're really risking a 1x when you're trying to go for lap time. I would say where we're seeing Nick Rowland come through now, these two, particularly the left-hander there.
The 90.
The 90 left, yeah, they're right in the middle. That might be one way cutting that as fine as possible might risk a 1x, and there might be some lap time in there, but these cars don't particularly, they're quite stiff, so they don't particularly like jumping curbs too much anyway, so there's probably not a huge amount of lap time in that. So anywhere else you're going to get a 1x, it's really just going to be from a mistake, so your lap's probably pretty ruined anyway. So I'm not expecting to see a lot of people with invalid laps in this session, as Rogan finishes his second lap. Goes faster, I believe.
Yeah, by a few tenths.
1:25.399. So he's just about a tenth off where he was in practice, but he's still gone quicker than obviously quicker than anybody else. He sits on the provisional pole. Reed Sweeney improved as well, down to a 1:26.0. 1:26.030. Gomes did not improve. I think he made a mistake on his second lap. His last lap was in the 1:27s. So he's only got one more chance if he's going to try and launch himself up onto the front row. Dan Burke was also really quick in practice. And now as I was about to start talking about him being down in eighth, he jumps up to fourth, a 1:26.389 from the man. Blake McCord fifth, Gavin Bailiff back there in sixth.
Yeah, Dan just sneaking in within a second of Nick Rowland. The only other three drivers who are within a second of pole are our three main championship protagonists. So that's good to see that we've got a nice clear distinction there. Although Blake McCord is pretty close behind, we've got a really tight gap there between around third and seventh or eighth in the standings at the moment. Just a couple of tenths covering that whole group.
Yeah, obviously our attention being paid tonight to the championship battle. Nick Rowland, Reed Sweeney, Alex Gomes, by far the three main protagonists there, and they are the top three at the moment. Rowland comes through and does not go quicker. Reed Sweeney does, down at 1:25.742. That's a really good third lap from Reed Sweeney to solidify himself there on the first row of the grid.
Notable by his absence from the top five is James French down at 15. He's completed one lap so far, so he's got two more. He's coming towards the end of his second, although I've just seen him run wide in, if I can get rid of the pop-up in front of my map. That's turn 7. So I wouldn't expect this to be a particularly blistering lap, but let's see if he can get up into the top 5 with his third lap.
Yeah, incidentally, James came into the server very late, just before qualifying started, and didn't get a practice time, and at least in the official session, it remains to be seen what his pace has been like over the course of the week, but this should be a good indicator. His second lap is 1:26.1 P4, right alongside Alex Gomes, and he's got another lap to complete yet, does he not?
He does, and considering that I think I saw a mistake on that lap, I would expect this one to be perhaps even more competitive. So maybe we're seeing the effects of James dropping into the server late, having not done very many laps at all through the week, and he's just going to get faster and faster.
Yeah, just maybe use that first lap as a warm-up lap, get everything up to temperature. He's really wide there at the long left-hander. I think that's turn 6. Kind of squares it off, but there's no straightaway to take advantage of it on the exit because you're right back into the right-hander, like you said, Scott, in our opening. A lot of combination corners, and that's one of them.
Yeah, that one you can kind of diamond off as part of this whole combination thing.
Oh, that's the lap done.
Yeah, and that's the same corner I saw him make a mistake on the previous lap, so he's obviously struggling with that one at the end of the back straight. That would presumably be turn 8, because I've definitely got the wrong map. I've got the IndyCar layout here. But Yeah, that big long turn 6, I guess we're calling it, can be treated as kind of at least two apexes, if not two completely distinctive corners, as the second apex is used entirely to set up for turn 7, the run onto the back straight, which is obviously much more important to get right.
This feels like a cooldown lap for Blake.
It's certainly, well, you would hope so.
I'm just seeing Matt Hart.
To a halt.
I'm just seeing Matt Hart in the most competitive BMW leaving the pits, so that's interesting.
He might have one more lap, but this may also just be a run out the time. There's a minute and 10 left.
Yeah, it's a good little trick that I use every now and again with these sessions where you get more laps than you want. Is that you use your first 2 laps, so you only put 2 laps of fuel in, 3 laps if you include the out lap, of fuel in, use your 2 laps, reset, and then put your race setup on and use the last lap that iRacing gives you to practice on race setup for the rest of qualifying. And obviously iRacing allows you to just stay on the track for as long as you want, not recording times, but it can be a nice little trick to get yourself a little 5-minute warm-up session before the race. Particularly useful if you happen to be using a qualifying setup that's significantly different to your race setup, or you just don't want to sit around for 5 or 10 minutes. We've only got about 30 seconds left, so not super relevant to this session. But yeah, that looks like that's what Matt's doing.
It'll be interesting to follow Matt as well over the course of the evening. One of the top BMWs.
And the top Class D, as it turns out.
So he is.
Right behind the top rookie, so I'm not sure I really count that.
You've never been to Thunderhill, Scott.
I haven't. Where's Dushak sneaking into the top 10 on a rookie license? Always worth noting.
Yeah.
So our top 5, with qualifying now being complete, our grid will, of course, see Nick Rowland on the front row, as we've seen, I think, possibly every race won this season. 125.399 his pole time. Reed Sweeney will line up alongside Alex Gomes in third, and like we mentioned, these are the 3 protagonists in the championship. We'll be following their progress throughout both races tonight, but especially race 1 with the top 3, starting top 3. James French alongside Alex Gomes. In 4th, Dan Burke is on 5th on the grid, 126.280 in qualifying. Then we find Blake McCord in P6, Gavin Bailiff 7th, and Hugh North alongside him back in P8. Trevor Andrisco will start 9th on the grid. Wes Duchek, like you mentioned, slipped into the top 10 there. The top rookie license is the number... I can't see the number.
34, Duchek?
Wes Duchek? Yes, thank you. Got too many windows up in front of iRacing here. So we'll grid on the front straightaway at the Brickyard and set up for a full formation lap, and then start 30 minutes of sprint racing around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Our format for tonight, same as it's always been. The first 30 minutes, we'll take a break. Afterwards, invert the top 10, and then set the grid for race 2. So our 10th place finisher in race 1 tonight will start number 1 on the field for race 2, and then we get to see the chaos that follows.
Yeah,
which
Brendan,
I'm always really looking forward to.
A thought occurs. Have we talked about the championship situation, and should we do that before we take the green?
We should. Let's give that to Scott Michaels. I think he is the most in tune with some of the scenarios that can play out tonight. But Scott, if you can, and the next couple minutes before we go green here, just run down the championship situation at the top.
You've definitely oversold me there, but because it's when you throw in drop rounds, things get extremely confusing. So I kind of I have a very broad overview of the top 2. As far as
I think we went standing start.
Oh, we went standing start. So we did.
Okay.
I did not expect that. Nick Rowland leads the field away from the green flag. Reed Sweeney's had a terrible start. Alex Gomes is the big benefactor here. There's chaos in the back, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Blake McCord, I think, has snuck up the inside of everybody. He's side by side with Gomes through turn 2. Gomes, this is all happening behind Nick Rowland. Gomes is going to hang tough on the outside. Blake McCord slides up the inside, and he's going to spin. Contact is made with Gomes, who has to see second now.
Right to James French.
He's taken out James French as that, but Gavin Bailiff is the one who's been the major benefactor here, and he's picked up second from Alex Gomes. All this is allowing Nick Rowland to scoot away right out the front of the field.
Yeah, it was Perry Herndon who spun on the first straight, but he managed to have a crash all on his own. Everyone else managed to avoid him. Presumably, the rest of the entire field was much more aware than we were, because they all seemed to take off, and nobody was caught by surprise. So
yeah, we didn't have the start light graphic to remind us.
Indeed.
Oh yeah,
indeed. Nor did we participate in the drivers' meeting, as it turns out.
That's true.
Yeah, the drivers' meeting thing. Maybe we should note to commentary booth. Send someone to the drivers' meeting next season. We've got
this gap behind Nick.
It's massive, and no slipstream chance at all for Gavin Bailiff. It's 2.5 seconds down the front straightaway for the first time. The gap for Nick Rowland at the front.
Got a battle between James French, Ryan Thomas, and Max Calder in the only Ferrari in the field. Max seems to be slow on the straight, which is counter to what I was trying to sell earlier. He doesn't appear to have any damage though, so I'm not sure why that. He got overtaken by 2 Mercedes, one of which was James French, who definitely is damaged. Just going down the front straight there, but that was all racing for 8th position, I believe.
Yeah, James French was. As Alex makes a move on the inside of Gavin.
Yeah, Bailiff slides wide there at turn 6. Like we saw in qualifying, he can't get back to the second apex or second corner there. Reed Sweeney's going to look at the inside of Gomes, and Gomes better give room here. There's not a lot of it on the exit unless you run out over the exit curb. And he's going to try a move up the inside on the brakes to turn 8. Bailiff hangs tough on the outside. This is really kind of a challenge to snake your way through here, but Reed Sweeney's taking advantage of it, and Gomes has to back out through that 90-degree left-hander.
Yeah, and he's
Gomes is really slipping here because Andrusco, I think it is, up the inside through the right-hander. He can't hang on, and it's given Gomes the launch off the corner, but he's lost. Not only did he not get the spot from Gavin Bailiff, but he's lost the spot to Reed Sweeney as well. And meanwhile, Nick Rowland, now 4.5 seconds clear of the front of the field.
Just behind that battle you were talking us through there was Hugh North was defending from Wes Dushak, and he ran wide out of the last corner before the banking. All over the grass, lost the place to Dushak, and he's now losing the place to James French, and Ryan Thomas is right there for company as well.
Yeah, that damage on James French doesn't seem to have slowed him up down the front straightaway any. He's gotten clear of Hugh North in the braking zone there. Ryan Thomas not quite able to make the same move. And he'll slot in behind as they work their way through the first sector.
Yeah, James French made contact with, I missed who exactly it was, but somebody got turned around. It might have been Matt Strand. Got turned around very early in the first lap, and his trajectory was right into the path of James French's.
You know what? I think it was our spinner on the first lap, whose name is going to escape me. Was it Dan Burke?
I think it was Blake McCord.
It was Blake McCord. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It was a really strong start from Blake, and then he lost it going through, I think, turn 4, turn 5 there. And then off the chaos behind it took out James French.
Unfortunately, that was all on his own for Blake, who has become sort of known for avoiding other people making mistakes like his there. So unfortunate for him to get to the last round and then make one of his own. But yeah, he just lost it all on his own on the inside of the game.
Wait, what's this?
Rowland's in the pits. Did he jump the start?
You know, he may have.
He was well clear at the front of the field, and I think there's a chance that Nick Rowland has jumped the start. And Scott, go ahead and make your point, because I'm sure it's the same thing we're all thinking.
Sorry, I'm just going back and checking, and he definitely did. It was very minor. It almost looks like he just had the clutch out and clicked into gear, but that's not really an iRacing thing. So I don't know whether he just touched the throttle or something along, or just really.
iRacing standing starts are not very forgiving in terms of jump starts, so there's no stopping and then waiting until the lights go.
But there's no effect of, for example, changing gear and it causing a slight bit of acceleration or anything like that through the wheels or anything like that, because it has an auto clutch. Even if you have to So I'm not sure how he managed that, other than just slipping his finger on the clutch button or something along those lines.
That was kind of what I figured it must have been, but whatever the cause was, now Alex Gomes and Reed Sweeney have a much different picture on their hands. Yeah,
and this is particularly damning for Nick Rowland. It's not just the fact that now he's further down the field, but it's been such a long pit lane at Indianapolis. I mean, you're 30 something, I think 37 miles an hour down the length of the front straightaway at Indy. He's all the way back into 22nd, if I have that right.
That is right, yeah.
That is absolutely brutal for Nick Rowland.
And Reed Sweeney in the lead makes contact with a Mercedes in front of him.
But
That's Alex.
Slipsky, maybe?
Yeah, he's Alex Slipsky and... Oh, I'm trying to find out.
And someone just punted Bailiff, excuse me.
Oh, it's chaos, absolute chaos at the top of the field. You're right. Bailiff is off. Josh Olson is off. Now, Bailiff had lost the position to Gomes and Sweeney earlier. We saw that happen just as Nick Rowland made it into the pit lane for his penalty.
Not a great rejoin for Gavin.
Yeah, so what happened there with Reed Sweeney was Josh Olson and Alex Slipsky came together right in front of him, and it seemed like Slipsky, in the middle of recovering his car, really wasn't aware that the leader was coming right up behind him and just drove into the side of him. There's what looks like minor damage to Reed Sweeney's car. He definitely got held up quite a lot, but hopefully the damage isn't enough to cause him issues for the rest of the race. We'll see when he comes back onto the straight whether he's lost any straight line speed, and I'll check whether his suspension is bent by dropping into his cockpit.
Incidentally, Scott, the top 4, at least top 3, all are carrying a little bit of damage. Alex Gomes, I don't think we mentioned this, Alex Gomes has a little bit of damage to the right front of his red number 64 Mercedes. Reed Sweeney has almost identical damage to the left front of his car, owing to the contact we just talked about. And Trevor Andrisco has got massive damage to the center of the front of his black Mercedes.
So I just watched Reed Sweeney and Alex Gomes go down the front straight. Firstly, Reed's suspension is completely straight. His steering wheel's in exactly the same position as Alex Gomes behind him. Gomes did close up on the straight. How much of that was slipstream and how much is down to damage, I don't know. But Reed certainly isn't... It's not crippling damage, so hopefully he'll be able to get away with this and carry on racing for the lead with Gomes.
Rowland, incidentally, just looking down through the field where he is at.
He's up to 21st now, so slow but steady.
Okay, so that's progress. Gomes, meanwhile, out at the front. We mentioned this drop situation, and I didn't know that it was actually going to come into play, given how much pace Rowland had at the front of the field. Gomes may not need these 10 points that he can pick up by getting past Reed Sweeney, but they're not going to hurt. And in a championship that's already proving to throw us a couple of curveballs, those 10 points might not be insignificant at the end of the night. Spin there for Chris McCoy, and I think there was contact involved because he's got a load of damage to the front of the endurance karting Mercedes.
Yeah, I think that there may have been a coming together with Baltaz and the 05, Andrew Baltaz.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
That as it was happening, and it was a comedy of errors. 3 or 4 different cars rejoined unsafely and took out the next car, which then rejoined unsafely and took out the next car. So hopefully that's the sort of thing that race control will take a look at and have a stern word with anyone who doesn't realise. Firstly, you have to hold the brakes if you're in the middle of a spin, and secondly, don't just rejoin the track without checking if there isn't another car that's about to cream into the side of you.
Worth asking the question here. Having not had a good look at the incident with Reed Sweeney and Alex Lipsky in the back markers there, do we think there's a potential for race control action on Reed Sweeney? Or
No.
is it wrong place, wrong time?
It was definitely wrong place, wrong time. If it was anyone's fault, it was Slipsky as he was recovering from the contact. Reed was just taking his racing line and arrived on the scene while there was a slow car. I don't think there was an issue there. I didn't see it really closely, so I stand to be corrected if necessary, but I think it was fine.
Black flag for Trevor Andrisco in third for contact.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if we saw exactly what would have caused that, but you see the damage to the front end, so it's not phantom contact. It definitely happened significantly enough somewhere.
He's coming in to serve that now.
Down through the apron in IndyCar Turn 1, or NASCAR Turn 1, as Scott would insist on, and gets on the brakes. And he now has to serve the same brutally long penalty. It's 55 miles an hour, so 37 is a little harsh, but 55 miles an hour down the length of the front straightaway in Indianapolis is still brutal, and that'll drop him at least behind the number 67 of Nick Rowland. So if there's a positive here to be gained, or an impact to this, other than dropping Andrisco out of the lead battle, it's that it should be a position anyway for Nick Rowland as he tries to march his way through the field, which he's doing with great effect, by the way. A 1:25.297 is the race's fastest lap.
I did find the incident. It was you noted Gavin Bailiff spinning off. It was because he took a massive whack straight up the behind.
Okay.
That'll do it.
I will say that Bailiff, there were spinning cars everywhere, not on the racing line. They were all spinning off into the gravel. Bailiff was definitely braking early in accordance with there being spinning cars everywhere. But at the same time, Andrusko just clearly didn't see that happening and ran straight into the back of it.
So as we watch these next, let's call it 20 minutes or so develop, 18 and a half minutes develop, the target for Nick Rowland, now that he's back in 19th, would be 10th, would it not? If he can haul his way all the way back up to 10th.
Yes, the long con.
Yes. Right? It's 30 seconds.
To be honest, he's in, and we didn't get to this earlier.
Oh, sorry, Scott, I'm going to interrupt you because Gomes is going to try to move around the outside of the braking zone at turn 1 on Reed Sweeney. He's not able to get the move done, and then he backs out of it going into the left-hander at turn 2, which he could have stuck his nose in there, and I think Reed would have given him racing room. But we saw this from Gomes last week at Road Atlanta, did we not, where he would try the move at the first apex, realize it wouldn't work, and rather than fighting it at the second, he just backed out and hoped for the crossover.
Yeah, and that's what's put him in the championship position he's in right now, which is one that lends itself to, again, being conservative. I think we need to force this championship discussion in right now because it kind of is playing out in front of us.
Very much so. I mean, the Nick Rowland penalty, more than maybe anything we've seen this season, is so significant to what we're going to see through the next 18 minutes, and in particular when the championship's standings update after race 1, the scene setter for race 2. I mean, this really has been a defining championship moment.
Yeah, because we've had 2 before, and they are the points where Nick Rowland has spent essentially his drop rounds, and that's the position he's in right now, where while he does technically lead the championship even after drops by 35 points, he's not in a position where he can afford a bad round because that will stand against him directly after drop scores, whereas Alex Gomes has 145 points in the bank that he can use if he has a bad race here at Indianapolis, either in race 1 or race 2. So just to keep the championship going into race 2, Nick Rowland, assuming Alex Gomes wins this race, which is not guaranteed by any means, he's not in the lead at the moment, but he's certainly fighting for it. If Gomes were to win this race, Rowland would need to score, I believe it's 15 points, or is it 10 points? It's somewhere in that region. It's not a lot of points, but it's some points. Otherwise, Gomes would wrap it up. Not with Reed Sweeney notwithstanding, I must admit I haven't calculated him into it. But just so to keep Nick Rowland in with a chance of winning the championship is kind of what I'm getting at. He needs to score a minimum of 10 or 15 points, and then that would require him to win race 2 and Alex Gomes to finish outside the top 5. As it is right now, it looks like Rowland is going to score the minimum number of points that he needs, but then obviously it puts him in a really difficult place for the championship with both Gomes and Sweeney in good positions. Sweeney has one half-decent drop round that he could bring in if he needs to, but to be honest, if he has to use it, it's probably not going to beat Gomes, who's demonstrated many times and is demonstrating right now that he'll go for the 2nd or 3rd place finish. As I'll let Brendan take over, as it looks like Gomes is about to attack Sweeney again.
He is. We were following Rowland there for the minute, but Gomes is going to try this move around the outside at turn 1 again. It's not going to work, and this time he falls in behind Reed Sweeney even earlier. He's much better through that left-hander, and I think if he can stick with Reed on the brakes at turn 1, it might give him the opportunity in the future, but he's so conservative. Like you mentioned, it's got him this far. He might as well stick with it, and if he needs to get aggressive later, he might be able to do that. But for the moment, these 90 points compared to, Nick Rowland's situation are, it's a gift. It's a massive gift to his championship hopes. And to risk that, I think, for the extra 10 that passing Reed Sweeney would get him is probably not worth it in terms of the overall calculus of how you manage your race 1 here tonight.
Well, maybe, but every point's going to count.
It absolutely will.
And the only devil's advocate point to that is that currently Alex Gomes is dropping a 75-point score, which
he's got a huge run. He's got a huge run, Scott, off the right-hander and onto, I think that's turn 11, onto the banking at IndyCar turn 2. They go through the right-hander that leads him onto the front straightaway. He's got the run, but maybe not enough of a gap to be able to take advantage of the gap. He does. Reed Sweeney did not defend coming off of oval turn 1. There's no overlap. Now there is. Gomes has got just enough of an advantage at the top end on the brakes into turn 1, and he backs out. Did not see that coming. I thought for sure Gomes, having made that move, would have made the most of the opportunity and really fired it in there on the brakes, and he absolutely did not. He let Reed have that one.
He's not going to get a better shot. At least against Reed Sweeney, he's not going to get a better shot car to car.
And that is why I was so surprised to see him back off.
I think I disagree there. Brendan called it live. He had his momentum killed as he had the run, but had nowhere to go with it as they went through IndyCar turn 1.
Yeah, so but I think Joseph's point about it. Joseph's point about it.
Run, but from slightly further back, he will have a chance to make a bigger overlap, I think. And also later on in the race, he's got plenty of time now, so he doesn't need to take a.
The next point I was going to make was that there's no pressure behind them, right? So he doesn't have to make the move now. He can wait 12 minutes.
Part of the issue is that Reed made a slight mistake through turn 11, that right-hander, and that was what gave Gomes the really obvious advantage down the length of IndyCar turn 1. And you're right, it killed his momentum, but if you're going to try and capitalize on Reed...
Let's be students here and see how much this draft helps him out.
Big time. Look at this. A massive closing rate. And this time, Alex Gomes fakes left, dives right on board down the front straightaway, and this time... No, again! Again! And he almost clips the back of Reed Sweeney as they make it through the right-hander. Again, Alex, he's just so conservative on the brakes into turn 1.
It's not
so
just
conservative.
It's the same thing we were seeing at Road Atlanta in turns 10A and 10B, where he's not willing to get within a couple of car widths laterally of another car. If he just moved over and used the road that Reed Sweeney had given him there, he wouldn't have to brake so early because he wouldn't have such an acute angle for the corner. But we've seen this from him before, where he just doesn't seem willing to get laterally close to another car and use the space that he's given, which is, reasonable in the position he's in. We all know what racing netcode's like, particularly here in Indianapolis. Not necessarily in GT3 cars, but we've been watching Indy 500s for the last couple of weeks, and we had nothing but netcode problems. Those cars are doing 230 miles an hour. These cars aren't, but it's not worth risking. Getting a penalty, I think, would be the worst thing if he.
To get black flagged and brought down the order, I think that's fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the devil's advocate point I was trying to make earlier, as he's about to get another slipstream and completely cut me off, but is that he has 75 points in the bank. It's his best drop score that he's currently dropping. So actually 90 points is only a 15-point gain over that, whereas 100 points is a 25-point gain over that, which is a pretty significant increase. So it might be worth going for this win.
Huge draft again, but he's going to try on the outside of this time of Reed Sweeney, and Reed is much better through the right-hander and again takes the position through. I wonder if part of Gomes' strategy is to just try and force Reed into a little mistake at turn 1, either on the brakes or through the corner.
I think that's a little too cerebral. I think he's a little anxious about coming into turn 1 offline.
That's fair, but you would expect Reed, and there's no reason to believe that Reed wouldn't give him the racing room. I understand they're battling for a championship, and this is really pressure stuff, but these have been two of the cleanest racers we've had all season, and you would think that they'd give each other the room, and if Alex got the position fair and square, that Reed would give it to him.
We've got a battle for 4th position as Hugh North has been caught by James French, who is presumably still recovering from his lap 1 shenanigans, although Hugh North has had a few incidents of his own. There's 4 tenths between them right now, and James French seems to be closing in.
Gomes has got another run here off of the right-hander at turn 11.
They've got a Ferrari in front of them that's a lot behind, but I don't think that'll really help Reed out much.
No, it's Max Calder in the Ferrari, and they're not quite close enough. Now, Gomes has set up 11 much, much better, and it's given them the run all the way down the front straightaway. He keeps it tight to the inside, and this time he's alongside by the time they cross the yard of bricks down the front straightaway. There's 9 minutes to go, and I think this is Gomes' opportunity to take the lead away from Reed Sweeney. Again, so conservative on the brakes. He hangs tough with him there. Just a little overlap through the right-hander, and he backs out of it through the left. This time he's really close to the back bumper of Reed Sweeney, climbs the curb at turn 3, fires it down the inside at 4, and there is so very nearly contact through the last of the right-handers.
Yeah, that was a much more risky move than anything he's been backing out of in turn 1, so I'm not sure what the logic was there. Yeah, I'd certainly like to see him just use a little bit more of the room that Reed Sweeney's giving him into turn 1 and make the move definitively.
The thing that's curious to me is Reed's giving him so much that he could block pass him a little bit, Alex could, and probably maintain the position that way. I don't know if he's afraid of being repassed.
Yeah, no,
Gomes setting it up where he doesn't want to be leading on the last lap or two because he thinks Reed would make the same move again. And honestly, if Alex isn't being held up on lap-by-lap pace, there's no reason to get out in front of Reed Sweeney. But he's got to make the move when he has the opportunity close enough to the end of the race.
I don't think he's been able to pass Sweeney before the line, has he? So there's no element.
I was thinking that too.
No, last lap was the closest he's been, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, so there's no element of not wanting to lead out of the last corner. There's another example there where he didn't beat him to the line.
This time, again, a huge head of steam on the brakes. And does he have it this time?
They're side by side.
This is the closest they've been. Alex Gomes, they're 2 drivers right. Turn 2, turn 3 now. Alex on the inside. They come onto the brakes. Turn 4. Gomes has got the move just about done. He slides wide and cuts Reed Sweeney's exit off. And I think this is Alex Gomes clear into the lead for the first time tonight.
Now, you know what I'm really interested in is obviously going to be, is Reed going to pass him back on the way into turn 1?
I feel like Reed is missing a couple of kph in top speed through that damage he's got. It looks more significant than Gomes is.
You think it's more than slipstream?
Yeah, that's kind of what the next point I was going to make, is that these cars don't slipstream particularly well, so the kind of run that Gomes keeps getting says to me that there's a little bit of a discrepancy in top speed as well. So we'll find out in about 30 seconds, but I don't think Sweeney's going to be able to come back, especially as Gomes is now going to have slipstream on with the
you're right, yeah.
Head of it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gomes with the slipstream now. That's in behind Max Calder in the Ferrari, and it'll give him just a couple of miles an hour down the front straightaway. Hopefully Alex will be able to make a clean move down at turn 1. I'm sure Max realizes that the leaders are coming up behind him, but this is Reed's first opportunity in the slipstream, and like you guys have mentioned, he's really not even able to hang with Alex, especially with Alex having that slipstream.
I was going to say, I think Alex is being towed along.
There's a little element of that, but the fact that he couldn't get within 5 car lengths of him says to me that there's a little bit of top speed missing from that car.
Yeah, his rear stepping out and everything.
He's pushing hard now. I think even just to stay with Alex.
That's going to be the other element, is that Alex is going to be slightly quicker off the last corner, just because we've seen he's got more pace. And that's going to make things harder for Reed Sweeney as well. So
when you watch the onboard from Alex Gomes, he sacrifices that 90-degree left-hander and really uses that as an opportunity to set himself better up for the right-hander that leads onto that long front straightaway.
Yeah, that little curly Q section is so difficult in basically every car, because you have to eat one of those corners really badly, basically.
Yeah, and be very precise about it, which is even tougher in a GT3 car at this speed. I mean, it's such a slow left-hander, but if you get it right and you're precise about the way you approach the corner, it really gives you the opportunity to maximize your run all the way down the front straightaway, and it's worked out really, really well for Alex Gomes in this case. Did we have a spin from Nick Rowland? No,
I believe so. He's up to 11th.
Yeah, he's actually coming through the field quite nicely. We've got Mercedes on Mercedes action for 4th place, as Hugh North just took a big bite of grass coming out of the last corner, so that's going to give James French a really good run. But I think French is also suffering from top speed damage. We're seeing a good example of him really struggling to get the kind of runs that Gomes was getting. But he's still going to get down the inside, brake nice and late, and that should be a nice block pass that's going to stick.
Now, with the fight for the lead, I think more or less resolved. That gap is hovering around the second. I am inclined to hang out with Nick Rowland for a bit and see if he pulls up on 10th, because it's going to be awfully close.
Certainly got the pace to. He's about 2 seconds quicker than Matt Hart has been in his BMW. That lap, it was even more than that. But that'll be P10, and that's not only worth points, but it's worth starting position for race 2 as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's a small gap up to Ryan Thomas, so that seems a little less plausible, but 10th seems in the cards.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, if he can get up that far, I mean, every position is going to matter because every point is going to matter for Nick, right? Never mind the starting position. He's got the pace to outrace somebody head-to-head if he really needs to, and he almost certainly will need to. But he's got to maximize the number of points he can get out of race 1 here because, like we've mentioned so many times, he has no drops remaining. He's had 2 bad results this season, and that more than anything is going to hamper him going into race 2. So these points, every single position he can pick up between now and the end of the race in about 3.5 minutes' time is really going to matter.
You say that, but actually, if he finishes in 10th, unless I've counted wrong, which is very likely, I believe 10th place is 54 points, and his highest drop at the moment is 56. So actually, right now, this score isn't going to count at all. So the only thing that matters
to qualify, it's just a gridding advantage.
Exactly, too. Which means that after drops, we'll add 56 points onto his tally, which conveniently brings him onto 601. It's nice, easy maths. Whereas Alex Gomes will add 100 points on, which is also nice, easy maths. So that will get him on to 615. So Gomes will go to 14 points ahead in the championship after drops. At that point, it really, if Nick wins the next round, Gomes is going to have to score points because his drop round isn't good enough to fall back on. But he only needs to be within 15 points. But again, actually 15 points is second place.
It would be second place, exactly. And I think Roland would probably have the win on a tiebreak if Gomes fell to third.
Well, 15 points, but second place is 10 points, but down on the win. So there would be no tie that way.
But third place would.
Third place is 80 points, so that's 20.
So no, it wouldn't be enough. I thought it was 85. That's my mistake. You're absolutely right, Scott.
The tie would be if Roland finished second and Gomes finished fourth.
Right.
That's kind of the position we'd be in to get a tie, but that seems unlikely. So.
Yeah, that seems as unlikely as you would hope.
Well, but we thought maybe going into race 1 that it was going to be Roland running away. And certainly in the first 3 laps it looked like that, and then all of a sudden we saw the Audi number 67 of Nick Roland down the pit lane for a jump start, and here we are talking about Alex Gomes having a 15-point margin heading into the final race.
Roland comes to pass Ryan Thomas for 9th place. So at this point, actually, points are going to start to matter because I believe that brings him up to 56 for this race, which matches his worst drop. So if he picks up one more position from here on, he starts actually picking up useful points in the championship.
Right, but he's got 2 laps to pick up Perry Harrington. He doesn't have damage. I think Perry Harrington probably does.
He was a second quicker than... sorry, no, I'm looking the wrong way around there. He was 2 seconds quicker than Perry Harrington last lap and is currently 3.5 behind. Is this the last lap, Joseph, or do we have one?
I think he'll have 2.
This is starting the final lap for Gomes, so it's a lap and a half for Nick Roland to get that done.
And he has about a lap and a half's worth of gap, so this is going to be really close. Could be slipstreaming to the line, depending on how much damage Perry Herndon has. That will be 2 points, but that at this rate, that could be 2 necessary points. Although it doesn't stop Gomes being able to win the championship with a second place finish.
No, you're absolutely right, and that is maybe the most significant thing we're going to see in race 2 is watching Gomes try and march his way through the field from what, at least for the moment, looks to be a 10th place starting spot. Meanwhile, Nick Roland will be clear out the front for the most part. Anyway, Alex Gomes onto the back straightaway for the final time, the 21st time in race 1 tonight. It's not the race 1 we expected. It's been enthralling nonetheless, maybe not from an on-track action perspective, but the chaos that this threw the championship race into for the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries has been completely gripping. And in this case, it's worked out in Alex Gomes' favor. He's been the most consistent driver over the course of the season, without question. He's had some really fine results, and he's picked up a few wins along the way. And in race 1 tonight at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Alex Gomes in the number 64 Mercedes is going to take a victory and the 100 points that go with it to say nothing of the $100 for an entry next year at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, and do his best to mount a championship charge against Nick Rowland tonight. Winner, race 1, Alex Gomes.
Should we go back to Nick Rowland?
And we already have, Scott. We're on board with the number 67 Mercedes. He's got the run on Perry Herndon, but I think he might just be a little bit too far back. Down through turn 11, 12, the right-hander, and on to turn 13. Plenty of draft, and Herndon's got damage. But there's a margin to make up there, and I'm not sure this is going to be enough for Nick. He's closing, and he's closing quickly. They go over the grid and up to the yard of bricks, and Rowland is going to fall just about a tenth short of picking up 2 more points for his championship charge in the USATkarting.com Invitational eSeries.
So, as we discussed, we don't think that will matter if everything goes to script for this next race. But if Nick doesn't win and it comes down to a couple of points here or there, then yeah, that could be the moment that really that changes the championship.
If anything, it's helped your situation, Scott, because you've already done the math for him finishing 9th. So there's no more adjustments to be made there.
Well, assuming I was anywhere near correct, which I don't even have pen and paper, let alone a calculator. I could be way off. There could be people screaming at me saying that I've got that totally wrong, but I think I'm somewhere near correct. So yeah, hopefully, am I right in thinking that we're going to get an updated championship before race 2?
We are. TJ, our fearless leader in the USAC Karting Invitational eSeries, TJ Helsema, will be updating the points in between races, so everybody understands where things stand moving into race 2 tonight. He did some calculations on the fly, but these will be official, and they will include all our gaps as well.
Yeah, so just to remind people and also put myself up to be completely embarrassed when my maths are completely off. But I believe that Rowland is going to have a 14-point lead over Gomes after drops going into race 2. Reed Sweeney will be there or thereabouts, but I don't think he's going to be. He's going to need both Rowland and Gomes to have bad race 2s.
Yeah, Reed really doesn't have any drops to play with.
He had a 65-point race, I think, that he's dropping, but that's not going to help.
It's worse than that, Scott. He's had a 2-point and a 14-point.
Yes, good point. Sorry, you're right. And I'm trying to just make sure that I've got that right with Nick Rowland. He has his worst 2 rounds are a 15 and a 56. So yeah, that 56 is, I think that's the same as what he just got here. Within a couple of points. So he'll be adding that on, which will get him just over 600, and Gomes is going to be on 615 after drops. The real killer for Rowland is that, well, it's not necessarily a killer. If Rowland goes and wins this next race, it's kind of irrelevant, actually, that Gomes has all these amazing results to fall back on. He's got 2 75-point results that he's dropping. So yeah, if Rowland isn't able to outscore 75 points by 15, which it means he needs to finish first or second, then Gomes will definitely beat him in the championship. And if Rowland is able to outscore them, then those 75 points are actually, or those 2 drop races are actually completely useless to Gomes, because he's got to outscore them to have a chance of beating Rowland's tally. So yeah, it's not a straight fight, because Gomes can afford to finish right behind Rowland. That will be enough. It doesn't even matter where Rowland finishes. If Gomes is in the next position, then that will be enough to beat him. And you would have to say, assuming he doesn't jump the start of the second race in a row, which I would say you don't really deserve a championship if you do that. Rowland is odds on for this win in race 2. Just has to put together half an hour of time trial laps, given the pace that he's had all season, really. So the job is then for Gomes to come through to second. I think it's pretty much going to boil down to that.
And that is a job easier said than done. I mean, not to.
Much easier, especially considering how conservative Gomes has been in overtakes.
Sure, and that will work to his credit, but some of the challenge is going to be, I mean, we've seen some of the chaos on these opening laps in the reverse grid races in particular. Having Rowland at the head of the field will help, and I think the standing start will help. There's still 9 cars or 8 other cars in front of Gomes that, and more behind Gomes that, can really play a role in him getting through lap 1 cleanly. He's got pace. He can get back to the podium I would think. But if, he and Reed Sweeney were clear at the front, and it was all he could do to get by Reed, he had to wait for that exact right opportunity. And if Nick Rowland is going to be running out, ahead of the field, Gomes is going to have to find a way through that sooner rather than later so that he has the opportunity to get all the way back to second. Because like you mentioned, Scott, it will take that if Nick is able to put together a clean 30 minutes.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't take into account there is the fact that Rowland isn't starting on pole, he's starting second. So he's
good point.
First. The other thing which could play into Gomes's favour is that maybe it was a one-off, it's a very small sample size, but we saw a very, very clean start this time relative to the rolling starts we've seen in previous races. So there was literally just one spinner. I didn't go back and look at what caused that, but if the start can be that clean through the first few corners, that could really give Gomes an opportunity to pick off a few places and get himself ahead of the mayhem before it all kicks off, inevitably, as it seems to. But that could play into Gomes' favour if he's able to make a few places in a clean standing start.
I think we haven't mentioned Reed Sweeney too much, and we're just trying to simplify things as much as we can until we get the official points update. But I think Reed is, unless something chaotic happens with Nick and Alex, Reed is probably just going to be out of touch.
Yeah, well, he's
overall championship.
He's in the same drop position as Rowland, as you meant. He's got a 2 and a 14, so those have to be his drop rounds. And he scored 90 points just then, which puts him on to 585, whereas Rowland is on 601. So he's in the same kind of position as Rowland, but 16 points behind. So he's got to find a way to make up 16 points on Rowland, essentially. They're in an absolute straight fight. If Rowland finishes 15 points behind Sweeney, then I would imagine Gomes is going to be in a position to win the championship as well. I'm not actually, is that even possible if I think about that for half a second? That puts Reed Sweeney 30 points behind Gomes, and Gomes, even if he DNFs this next race, has a 75, and it's impossible to score more than 30 points.
Right.
5. So, therefore, Reed Sweeney has no chance of winning the championship.
Okay.
Winning Gomes will, just on drop races. So, yeah, there we go. We can wrap that up. And nobody else behind was anywhere near close enough to be involved. So it really is a two-way fight at this point between Rowland and Gomes. Actually, that simplifies it nicely, doesn't it? We can say that in the case where Rowland wins, Gomes wins the championship if he finishes second. Rowland wins the championship if Gomes doesn't finish second.
Do we have a sense of whether, if Reed had held on to the point, if he would have still been in contention, or was he out of it either way?
I think he would have been, because that would have put him on 595 to go to Rowland's. To Gomes's 605. So he would have only been 10 points behind at that point, and you can score 10 more points at 75, obviously. So that was pretty critical, actually. That's that move Gomes put on Sweeney, which really was predicated by Sweeney running into Slipsky, unfortunately. Because I think that gave him the damage that made the pass inevitable, and also held him up and brought Gomes into play. So that was kind of a pretty championship critical moment for Reed Sweeney, unfortunately. Shame for it to be somewhat decided by that. But and if I look at Reed Sweeney's results, if you ignore his drop rounds, he's finished on the podium every race except race 2 at Road Atlanta, where he had, I think that's a 5th. Which it doesn't sound like that's going to cost you a championship, a 5th place finish, but that's kind of been it.
Yeah, it speaks to how consistent. Certainly Alex has been, and Nick a little less so. Nick's been in a similar situation to Reed, but it definitely gives you a sense for how consistent Alex has been. That they've basically been finishing in lockstep, but Alex is the only one who's got a shot.
Yeah, I've actually missed the way the table's drawn up. I've missed the very first round of the year where Reed Sweeney had what looks like a 6th place finish. So that actually that's really the differentiator, because Gomes has also had a 5th place finish that he's a 4th place finish that he's having to count. But really, the only other differentiator is that 6th place finish for Reed Sweeney in the very first round of the season at Lime Rock. Beyond that, and then it's just losing that 1 place to our champion-elect, Alex Gomes, in the in the last round that we just watched, that's kind of been the critical moment towards the end of the season that really has swung things around. Not only for Sweeney and Gomes, but also for Roland. That would have given Roland much more of an opportunity had Gomes not. I think at that point, Roland would potentially be able to win the championship with a win no matter what Gomes did, if Sweeney had stayed ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. And in this case, having just received an update from TJ, like you mentioned, Scott, your math is correct. Gomes on 615, Roland on 601, and Sweeney on 585. So all of our calculations were correct, and the logic is correct with regards to Reed Sweeney not being able to catch Alex Gomes. It's 30 points. And, of course, Reed can't pick up that many on Gomes owing to Gomes' current drop situation, which is, at worst, he's going to have to count a 75-point race. So that won't help Reed Sweeney any. Roland, meanwhile, like you mentioned, if Roland is able to go out and win race 2, and he's in the strongest position to do so, although, of course, he was strongest position in race 1 as well. If he can do it in race 2, it puts Gomes in a position where he needs to finish second. Third will not get it done. And it will put Roland then with 100 extra points, and it'll give Gomes only an extra 80, and that would give Roland the championship by 4.
Okay, so I've been flipping around between camera angles. Let's boil this down, right? Let's talk about what the most likely scenarios are, because Nick Roland is going to start in the front row. Barring another jump start, he will probably win race 2. Let's be real about that. What can Alex do?
Alex has no choice but to finish second. He's got to pick his way, use the first 20 minutes, pick his way through the cars that have finished behind him but will be starting ahead of him, and get himself, at the very least, up onto the podium and in a position to make a move on second, coming to, let's say the last 5 to 10 minutes of race 2. And then he's got to actually get that move done. Now, we saw a lot of chaos there that took out some of the main contenders, but when you really boil it down into who's got pace and who doesn't, it was Gomes and Sweeney out in front of pretty much everybody else. And if the two of them can keep it clean and they're able to get into second and third, then it really just will be a straight fight between the two of them. Now, that being said, Dan Burke did a qualifying lap in the low 126s right around Gomes. Sweeney was quite a bit quicker than Gomes back in qualifying for race 1. James French had good pace, and he'll be starting up ahead of Alex and of Reed. So there's a couple potential little spoilers in there, and it's not going to be obvious for Gomes to be able to clear that traffic quickly, efficiently, and most important, cleanly. But that is really his only opportunity to get back to the podium. He's going to have to make those moves quickly, and certainly, and Scott, I'll let you confirm this, but I think he's going to have to be much, much more decisive than he was around Reed Sweeney and some of the moves he's made over the last couple of races.
Yeah, the point I was about to make, actually, is kind of sort of the opposite of that. It's that, yes, he has to get to second, but he only has to get to second. He doesn't have to worry about catching Nick Roland, who's going to have a head start on him. He won the race we just saw, which meant that he beat everyone. We probably wouldn't have beaten Nick Roland had Nick not got the jump start, but that doesn't matter. Nick's irrelevant to him. He's got to beat everyone else in the field, but he just did that, so he's got half an hour to do it again. The challenges, as you say, are going to be, firstly, would Reed Sweeney have won that race if he hadn't had the contact with the back marker? He was in the lead at the time and had a gap on Gomes, so it's reasonable to think that he certainly had a chance. So Reed Sweeney's going to be a difficult guy for Alex Gomes to beat, and Reed is obviously going to try and race for the best result in this race, the $100 and second in the championship, so there's no reason to think that he'd just let him through. But again, Gomes only has to do basically what he just did in race 1, only starting a little bit further back. So he's got half an hour to do it. While, yeah, I agree that I would like him to see him be more assertive with his passes anyway. Regardless of championship position, I think he's shown great maturity and an ability to race extremely cleanly. But I'd like to see him be a little bit more assertive with his passes. And yeah, considering the the only goal he has now is finishing second. He's going to need to make those passes, but he does only need to make those many passes in half an hour. He doesn't need to make 15 passes in the first 5 minutes. He needs to make 9 passes in 30 minutes. So hopefully we don't see him rush into things, but I don't think that's going to be the issue. The issue is going to be whether he gets caught up in somebody else's accident, unfortunately, as we've seen plenty of times earlier in the season. That's it's been his ability to avoid that most of the time that's really put him in the championship position he's in. So it's going to be down to him doing that one more time and then getting through into the second place right when he needs to.
His ability to do that, Scott, like you mentioned, has been uncanny, frankly. I mean, he more than anybody else in the field, he's been able to steer clear of that chaos and come home with a result. It hasn't always been a win. I think this is only his second win on the season. And it wasn't all that long ago that we were saying that he needed those kinds of results to stay with Nick, especially if Nick was able to string some good race twos together. But he's done that, and it's not just sheer luck on Alex's part. Sure, some of it is, who you're around and your the chances of people spinning around you or making a mistake around you, but he's put himself in a position where it hasn't affected him the way it's affected others, whether it's giving somebody more room, not fighting an apex with somebody, not pinching somebody down to an apex. Whatever the case is, it's worked for him. And like you mentioned, he's got to do that one more time. Whatever it is he's doing, do that again for another half an hour, but when the time comes, be able to make those, let's say, slightly more decisive or slightly more aggressive moves and get them done so that he can get himself up into second if indeed Nick Rowland runs away with race 2 at the front.
Yeah, he's got to survive, which he's done really well all season. So he's just got to carry on doing that. But then he's got to go and win the championship, which might take a few really fast laps to catch the guys whoever gets away in second or third ahead of the Mayhem, and it's definitely going to take a few solid overtakes towards the end of the race, I think. And that's really what it's going to boil down to. I think there's not a lot. Unfortunately, Nick with that jump start has lost himself the chance to be in control here. It's really Alex Gomes who's in control.
Yeah, very much so. Although, like we've mentioned now a couple of times, this top 10 invert has really kind of thrown things into a little bit of chaos, and at the very least, given us something to talk about and to watch Alex try and climb his way up through the field. We say that he's very much in control, but he's also the one with the most work to do now, because Rowland clearly has the pace out in front of everybody if he can get there and if he can stay clean, whereas Gomes is the one who's going to have to really pick and choose the battles in a way that keeps his nose clean and keeps the car clean, but also gives him a chance to get back up to that important second place position if things aren't working out in his favor otherwise. So, with that all being said, as has become customary here, I think we're going to take a break on DriversEye Live. The server is loading, and for those of you who are watching, but we're waiting for the end of our first race coverage here, Discord is acting up, which is fantastic. So, you may not be able to get back into the Discord, but the server session schedule is all the same. The server's up now in iRacing, and at 8:40 we'll grid the cars for another half an hour of racing from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So, drivers are joined by Justin Mudrak and Scott Mike. We'll take a break here for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll rejoin you, refresh our championship situation, and set the grid for race 2 from Indianapolis. We'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Well, a very good evening once again to you all. Thanks for joining us on DriversEye Live. This is the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and this is the last race of the season. Never mind just the last round. Race 9 was just a couple of minutes ago concluded and set us up for one heck of a championship battle. This is now race 10, and this is all in till the end. My name's Brendan Kazmarek. If you weren't with us earlier, joined tonight by Joseph Mudrock and Scott Michaels, both of whom will be along for the ride. Joseph's on production, and Scott has been with us as sort of our driver analyst throughout the season. Very happy to have everybody's company, and it's really been a great ride for us this season. Happy to have everybody along, like we said. Now, we've mentioned in detail the championship situation leading into our final race. It's now just Alex Gomes and Nick Rowland. Reed Sweeney has been counted out of the championship owing to his second-place finish a little earlier on this evening. And it's a 14-point margin for Alex Gomes out ahead of Nick Rowland, thanks to a ton of consistency. But what that means is that it might only be one position, Scott, that makes the difference at the end of our last half an hour of racing this season.
I think it's very likely to be only one position. I say that hoping that we don't have top 10 reverse chaos that we've seen earlier this season. We saw a great top 10 reverse race in Road Atlanta, which was our last round. So let's hope for something similar. If we get that, then that will play into the hands of Alex Gomes, whose only goal is to get to P2, assuming that Rowland doesn't have a disaster himself. If Rowland has a disaster, then it's game over. It's Alex Gomes' championship, no matter what happens, even if Gomes has a disaster. But yeah, it's really all it's going to boil down to. It boils down to Rowland getting past Reed Thomas and getting cleanly away from the field and using the pace that he's demonstrated to win the race, and then whether Gomes can come through from 10th to 2nd, and that's what he absolutely has to do in that situation.
That will be the challenge, and we mentioned that to go with that is the biggest challenge of Gomes keeping his nose clean. He's been so good at doing that throughout the season. He's got another half an hour to get through tonight. A standing start to come from the front straightaway of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then it's on for young and old, as they say, I guess, down south of the equator.
When do they say that?
They say that sometimes. Go watch some V8 Supercars broadcast, and you'll find it.
Yeah, but they also say debut.
What happened there was I started with the phrase, and I had nowhere to go with it, so that's where I went. The front row, in any case, is going to be Nick Rowland and Ryan Thomas. Ryan Thomas with a little advantage to driver's left, just up against the yard of bricks, as it were. Nick Rowland
We're just about to get the lights. We're just about to get the lights.
We are. It's a field of 29 for the last half an hour of racing in the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. The proverbial lights are red, and now the real lights are green. We get away from the standing grid at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and Rowland's got the jump, hopefully the right kind of jump this time. He's clear of Ryan Thomas headed down into turn 1. There's Gavin Bailiff on the inside. Alex Gomes, our championship leader, is stacked up down in, I think, 9th still at the moment. There's chaos in front. Gomes is through cleanly. There's spinning cars behind them, one in the gravel. I think Trevor Andrisco is there. There's a couple of them, but Gomes has made it through. That's the most important thing, at least.
Off at turn 4.
At least in the meantime, Rowland is clear out in front. Thomas second, James French third. Blake McCord is 4th in the Mercedes. Reed Sweeney is 5th. Gomes back in 6th. So that is what Alex Gomes has ahead of him, clear of the chaos on lap number 1, and he sets his sights forward for a championship run in the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. Matt Hart 7th. Nikita Poneris in the Audi is 8th. Austin Olds 9th. Perry Herndon sits P10.
Yeah, I was following Alex Gomes through the start there. He made good decisions, didn't try to rush anything, certainly didn't take the quickest through the pack, but kept his car in a straight line and managed to shoot the gaps between all the drivers who were spinning off on cold tyres. And there were plenty. But yeah, he made all the right choices there, and he's ended up in 6th place. It's quite a gap to 2nd, but we do know he's got the pace to overcome that if he can make the passes. That's kind of what...
And part of that will be staying in the slipstream. For the moment, he's there. with Reed Sweeney. He's got a little bit of pace down the front straightaway, but he'll be able to hang with that, I think, through the next couple of laps. He's got pace, so he'll be able to pick guys off in the infield as well. But it's going to be 4 more spots, and he's right up onto the back of Blake McCord now in the battle for 5th. McCord goes wide, and there was a little bit of drama with McCord in race 1. Not so in the meantime. Gomes thinks better of it out of turn 4 and into turn 5. He tries to set it up on the brakes through the left-hander at turn 6. McCord slides wide a little bit. Gomes goes up the inside, but now is on the outside for turn 7. McCord's on the curb and slides wide, but I think Gomes has got the position on the gas down out of the exit of turn number 7.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I was hoping we were going to see in the build-up, where I was talking about combination corners and the way a good driver can set up and overtake 3 or 4 corners in advance around a track like this, and that's exactly what we just saw from Gomes there. So really intelligent driving. Meanwhile, I don't know how we've decided to pronounce this, but let's go with Vincent Clement.
Vincent Clement.
Yeah, I don't know where he's from. That's where from.
He's in Texas, but who knows where
I was
he's
going to
from.
say Texas, yes.
He took a spin in turn 8, but he's managed to get back going again. I heard a big crunch. I don't think it was him, actually, because he's not very damaged. Perry Herndon has stopped coming out of the last corner before the banking and has taken a tow, so he's got bigger issues.
Big purple bar across the top of the timing screen, or across the top of your screen, for heaven's sake, means a new fastest lap of the race. It's Nick Rowland clear out in front of everybody by some margin, a 125.460, and that is what clear track pace looks like for Nick Rowland, at least to get things started for race 2. Alex Gomes, your other championship contender, is back there in 5th, and so far Rowland is doing exactly what he needs to do. Up ahead of Gomes, Reed Sweeney flies down the inside of Ryan Thomas.
I'll make this point really quickly. So we see Alex Gomes, we also see the position he needs to reach in order to win the championship.
Yeah, and that is James French in 2nd right now. So Rowland is cleared off at the front like we thought was going to be the case. Gomes now has the 3 cars he needs to pass over the next 26 minutes square in front of him.
Interesting that we really haven't talked that much about James French in this sort of. He's not in the championship battle, but he's going to play a part. He's a bit of a wild card because he spun out of his last effort in qualifying. He had an incident very early on in race 1 and picked up damage. So we don't actually know how much pace James French has. Right now, it looks like he's managed to get himself quite quickly into 2nd place and is pulling a gap on Reed Sweeney, who had a lot of pace in race 1. So if this carries on, it could make Alex Gomes' job extremely difficult getting into that 2nd place.
The one thing that Gomes has going for him is this. Well, he's got a couple of things going for him, and pace is certainly chiefly among them, but the slipstream is going to play a big role in all this, because even if James French is a little quicker through the infield, if Reed Sweeney can hang within about a second of James French, he can really, claw the rest of that margin back, or at least stay within striking distance down the front straightaway and in the braking zone for turn 1, and that might just be enough to let Gomes, if he's able to work his way through Ryan Thomas and past Reed Sweeney, the opportunity to get James French for 2nd. Conversely, if James French is able to clear that slipstream margin on the infield, then it makes Alex's job so much harder, because he's got to do it all on raw pace in the the 60% of the laps where he can make that difference up.
A couple of little things from down the field. We've seen Matt Strand disconnect and reconnect, and he's now disconnected again, so it looks like he's having connection issues. It says his throughput fell to an unexpected level, so I'm guessing that's more than just him leaving the server. That's him, his equipment unfortunately kicking in. So we won't see any more of Matt Strand this season. And also Max Calder has been given a black flag. Not sure what that is for. He was our sole Ferrari.
It's avoidable contact, Scott, very early on in the race. I think that penalty was given before the end of lap 1, and the Ferrari of Max Calder was in the pits. So Alex Gomes in the slipstream down the front straightaway on the back of Ryan Thomas. He dives to the inside and doesn't make the move. Oh, so Thomas is wide, and it opens the door for Gomes.
I was going to say,
and that time he's through.
Alex picked a reasonable braking point.
Oh, he's wide.
What happened there?
Hold on, has he got a slowdown?
Yeah,
he might have. I think you're right.
I think
he's behind the curb too much.
With, again, giving too much room laterally to Ryan Thomas in turn 1, but he's ended up giving himself a slowdown, which at the moment that's almost worse than contact, because he's lost that place again to Blake McCord. And
as Thomas is spun in front of him,
that'll help. But really, the big problem is that Gomes now has no chance of getting into the slipstream with James French and Reed Sweeney anytime soon, as McCord doesn't help.
Really
Thomas is going to
defensive
fall
here.
back
That's not
into the
helping.
Potter's heart battle.
Yeah, but McCord's being really defensive through the sequence here, and it's just destroying Gomes' ability to stay in rhythm through that whole sequence of corners. He's got the run off of turn 11, and that should be enough by the time they get to the end of the front straightaway. He's certainly got plenty of pace on the throttle, and we saw this in race 1. This is really his strength. But like you mentioned, Scott, the real penalty here is that it's dropped him out of the slipstream of Reed Sweeney and James French, who are just absolutely going at it down the front straightaway. And if nothing changes there, that's going to be a really hard margin for Alex Gomes to claw all the way back through as Sweeney around the outside. Gomes is through on the inside at turn 1. No slowdown this time, but more of interest up front is French and Reed Sweeney. Sweeney got the move done on the brakes on the outside at turn 1. James French gave way, and then French tried to hang with him, but honestly, I think Reed's got more pace than James, and he's well clear now out in front of James French.
Yeah, so it was critical of Gomes to make that decisive pass on Blake McCord, and he did so this time, which is good to see. But yeah, it's going to be, what's the gap? It's 5 seconds now between Gomes and James French.
With 21 minutes to go.
Yeah, without the help of the slipstream, that's going to be really hard work for him to close. It's kind of really going to depend on how much position swapping Reed Sweeney and James French do from here on. If they line up, I don't think Gomes has the pace on Sweeney to make the catch.
It's going to be difficult because French isn't even hanging on to Reed Sweeney, so they're not going to be in tandem by any means, but it also means they're not going to swap positions, as you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if French starts to fall off the back of Reed Sweeney, it leaves Reed out in front with clear track, which is okay, but really nobody helping him down the straights. French will then give the advantage to Gomes, at least for a time, and help him claw some of that pace back in the slipstream all the way down the front straightaway. If and when Alex Gomes can get to the back of James French, of course.
Yeah,
the
meanwhile,
pace
Nick
is there.
Rowland is out on his own 6-second margin, but he's doing everything he needs to do at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've got a bit of a lull. We haven't been talking much. Obviously, we've been distracted by the championship battle this whole evening. But just a little mention for Austin Olds, who has already made 15 places up from his 24th place starting spot. He's up to 9th in his Audi.
Guys, we've got a little bit of a skirmish here in the midfield, so let's keep an eye on that.
It's
Austin
more than that. This is a proper battle. It's Hugh North in the Mac Minarelli number 72 Mercedes. Gavin Bailiff is there in the Audi R8, the number 9 Red Bull car. Matt Hart is there in the Z4, and it's just Nikita Poneris is up in front of them. It's chaos down the Holman Straight and through the S's 8 through 11. That's Matt Hart giving up the position to Hugh North. And I think Gavin Bailiff is going to try and follow him through. The move can't be made, and they're going to go side by side around IndyCar Oval Turn 1, if you will. And I think Bailiff is going to have the spot.
If you find every consonant first, you might get to his name.
Yeah, the process of elimination, I think.
And that's Austin Olds in the blue and black Audi just behind Matt Hart as well. He's making a dive on Matt in the BMW, so that's another place for Austin. He did actually lose 2 places on that lap, so that's him getting one of them back. But yeah, still 14 places up from his starting spot. Doing the Nikita Poneris, while Nikita has made a measly 5 positions so far in this race, running 7th, which actually, I think that might be one of his best runs of the year so far.
Matt Hart threw a wicked block on Trevor Andrusko as they made their way between 3 and 4. I don't know if either of you saw that, but he took a defensive line.
A little bit of an update on our championship races. Alex Gomes was 0.3 slower than Reed Sweeney that lap, so it's really not looking good. James French has managed to, he had managed to just about cling onto the slipstream and is actually a 10th closer. As they went.
For Austin Olds. Sorry, Scott.
Commentator's curse. It's the first time I think I've ever done that. Poor Austin. I do apologise.
A little bit of a crossover.
He's got it this time, yeah. Andrew Balthus came through there on the recovering Austin Olds, and then Austin Olds just fired it back up the inside at turn 11 and was able to get the spot back.
I think we're going to see Hugh North attacking Nikita Ponaris as we go into turn 1 for 7th position.
Yeah, I think you're right, Scott.
I just talked about how well Nikita was doing as well, so I'm on a roll. But
well, Nikita had very little to defend here. Hugh North had the slipstream all the way down there, and by the time they got to the braking zone at turn 1 there, it was all Hugh on the inside.
So this lap, Alex Gomes was faster than Reed Sweeney, but it was by an entire 100th of a second. So it's really not looking good for Gomes' championship.
He'll only need about 500 more laps in order to catch up to Reed Sweeney.
Yeah, it's a shame this is 24-hour race, as he has to avoid, I think that was Perry Herndon rejoining the track on the apex. Anyway, it looks like that slowdown is going to end up being the critical moment in Gomes's. Well, I mean, you hate to say in the championship.
Well, but here's the thing: is in 2 races, it's a swing for each of the contenders, right?
Yeah. Rowland shot himself in the foot in race 1 and really set things back for himself. And Gomes' very small error, all things considered, was just enough to do the same for him now in race 2. Still some time to go, 17 minutes. We're not even halfway through race 2 here yet. But Gomes isn't really making any major inroads on James French, which would be sort of the bridge. That slipstream would be the bridge of the gap up to Reed Sweeney in second.
Well, he's 8 tenths faster than James French on the last lap, so he is making inroads there. But certainly, as far as Reed Sweeney is the target, you have to assume that he's going to have to catch and pass French pretty swiftly. But as he takes the 1x there, running a bit wide out of turn 2, I think the desperation of the situation might be starting to dawn on Alex Gomes here. But yeah, it's so lap time comparison again. It was 700ths of a second that time was the gap. So with a difference between Sweeney and Gomes in Gomes' favour, but I mean when it's that level, it's not really going to make any difference which way around that goes. So yeah. It's going to be backmarkers, I think. It's the next point that could affect the outcome of that fight.
Well, and I was just about to say, I think one of you, maybe both of you, made the point that it was kind of backmarkers that opened up that race for Alex Gomes, race 1, with the collision with Reed Sweeney. And
the same thing happened, if I remember right, in race 2 at Road Atlanta as well. So
I think so, yeah.
Maybe he's used up his luck. For the season, and it's all down to that one mistake on the curb. I mean, we can say it was a really small error, but then Nick Rowland's jump start was a really small error as well. So
on the order of a foot, and it cost him about a minute.
And in this case, probably a similar amount of distance is going to cost Gomes nowhere near as much time, but it's going to be as critical by the looks of things in the champion.
Yeah, Gomes, he's so consistent pace-wise, but unfortunately for him, so is Reed Sweeney. And just having to give up that, let's say, 2
move, by the way,
seconds
by Hugh North on the outside of Ryan Thomas in the turn 1 there.
And that's Hughes. He's been well. And then he's been hit by Gavin Bailiff through turn 4. Entirely unnecessary. And all that work, that was Ryan Thomas who was hit. Hugh North has done really well to get through all that. But Hugh North was just straight up taken out by Nikita Ponaris there at the apex of turn 4.
It wasn't Nikita, it was Gavin Bailiff, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, Gavin Bailiff, not Nikita. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, Gavin Bailiff was taken out by Trevor Andruscu, who got a drive-through, I think, in race 1. I think Bailiff may be on the back end of the steward's decision this time around.
James French contending with Justin Atchison, who was one of our remaining Pride drivers at the end of this season. Gomes, I don't think it's going to be close enough for the slipstream, but then again, neither was French. Margins this time around, Sweeney is a 126.1. French comes through 126.7 for James French, and Gomes does another 126.1. So like you mentioned, Scott, Gomes is right there for pace with Reed Sweeney, but he's got to make inroads. Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Oh, Atchison is off in front of Gomes. Gomes, I think, maybe just lifted a little bit through turn 3 there. But he gets through cleanly and now continues his chase of James French in front of him.
Yeah, I don't think Atchison would have... he was far enough ahead then, and then went far enough offline that hopefully he didn't have to lift. It's actually statistically remarkable that Reed Sweeney and Alex Gomes, I believe, have been within 100th of a second of each other for the last 3 laps in a row, which is not going to, it's obviously means absolutely nothing other than the fact that Gomes is going to struggle to catch Sweeney without finding another half a second a lap somewhere.
It's amazing how quickly and how much Reed Sweeney has pulled out on James French, because James really isn't off the pace. And clearly he was in a position, at the start of race 2 to be in third now. But he's fallen so far off the back of Reed Sweeney without really any major single mistakes. It's just been a very gradual slip that far back.
It's kind of the same thing for Blake McCord. I haven't been watching to see whether he's made any slips, but he's been running reasonable pace and was racing competitively with Gomes earlier on in the race, but he's now dropped to 4.5 seconds behind, while the remainder of the field is over 7 seconds behind McCord. So it's just we're seeing the pace of these top 3 drivers in the back end in the second half of the season, Rowland, Sweeney and Gomes, really stretching the field out.
Yeah, and it was always going to be that, I think, especially as the races cleaned up and some of that sort of weird race 2 luck was taken out of the picture. It was really just going to be down to pace, and it's allowed those 3 in particular to shine, really, really well, and given them a more or less clean fight to the end of the championship, to say nothing of their own, personal mistakes, but it's been enthralling nonetheless, and I'm glad it's worked out the way it has, because watching the 3 of them go at it race after race has really been fantastic.
It's a shame that this one has ended up playing out where they're all time trialing amongst themselves, though. Could have been a really, really amazing battle between Sweeney and Gomes. We can see how close they are on pace. They were an entire 400ths of a second apart on lap times on the last lap. So those two definitely the closest matched pair of drivers in the whole series, I think. It was a shame for Sweeney that things played out the way they did in race 1 and resulted in him being out of the championship, although Nick Rowland is now clearly not giving him any opportunity to come back from that. I don't think, if I remember right, the gap between Gomes and Sweeney is too big for Sweeney to overcome, with Gomes finishing third, but Gomes isn't currently in third, so right. I may go away and do a little bit of maths and see if this is going to result in Sweeney finishing second in the championship. So
we'll work through some of that. In the meantime, with just over 10 minutes left, and I think about eight laps to go, such as it is, 7.5 anyway. Cast your minds back, dear viewer, to I think it was race 2 at Road Atlanta, where Nick Rowland. It is, and this is the move for P13, I think, down the front straightaway and into turn 1. Dan Burke carrying a bunch of damage on the front of his endurance karting Mercedes, and Austin Olds has got the move made pretty cleanly. Yeah, absolutely cleanly through turn 2. Dan Burke was close on sort of the cutback, but Austin Olds is cleared out in front of him. Now they're going to be balked a little bit by Jonathan Patterson, who I think might be recovering from just an error of his own. Olds is early on the brakes and wide. Dan Burke tries to fire it down the inside. At turn 6, clips the curb, clips the side of Austin Olds, and goes for a little half spin. And himself gives up the position to Alex Lipsky. Yep. So that's a net gain for Alex Lipsky, a loss for Dan Burke, who now has his teammate, endurance karting teammate Perry Herndon, sat right in behind him on the way into turn 8. Burke is now on the back of Alex Lipsky again, and Burke is really aggressive in the braking zones. He gives Alex Lipsky a shove between turns 10 and 11. Not that the Mercedes needed more damage to the front end.
Yeah, it certainly got it.
Yeah. Just to check back up to the front of the field here, Gomes and French really just... Gomes and Sweeney, nothing between them on lap-for-lap pace. Yep, Gomes has actually given up a little bit that time to both Sweeney and James French. And like you say, every lap that he does this, it gets harder and harder for him to claw that margin back. And it's going to take some, let's call it an act of God, for Alex Gomes to make those positions up. He almost had one there because there's a parked Mercedes of Dave Nadeau on the apex of turn 10. And more than anything, that balked Gomes between 10 and 11 because he's been giving up that turn 10 apex lap after lap to set himself up better for 11 than maybe anybody else. and it totally prevented him from doing that.
So I've done the maths. It hasn't failed me so far, so hopefully it won't again. I believe there is a 30-point gap between Alex Gomes and Reed Sweeney, and between second and fourth place is only 15 points. So this shouldn't swing second place in the favour of Reed Sweeney. That should be safe with Alex Gomes, but I'm sure that will be no consolation, considering how close it looks like he's going to end up coming to first.
I'd like to draw your attention to the last lap times for second, third, and fourth, to say nothing of Nick Rowland out in front, because he is just absolutely running away with it. 126.039. Reed Sweeney, 126.403. James French, 126.403. Alex Gomes, 126.404.
That's stupid.
Absolutely remarkable. This is 1997 Formula One at Jerez qualifying all over again. But nothing like that.
I'm upset at you. Do you understand?
I don't care. I understand, but I just don't care, Joseph.
What I've learned is
We've been doing this for long enough that your reactions have no emotional impact on me.
What we've learned is that Brendan gets served up the Formula One ads on Facebook and actually watches them.
No. I've had that qualifying session stored in my memory for much longer than Facebook ads.
Okay.
Yep. In any case, it's remarkable. It really is remarkable, the consistency.
And Druska runs up on the back of Ponters a little bit.
French dipped into the 125s that time.
You said French dipped? Interesting.
Just to put a point on the Gavin Bailiff, I can't remember who he punted. Now, incident earlier, he has received a black flag, presumably for contact.
Yeah, quite rightly. It was wholly unnecessary.
Can you remember who he? I'm having a brain.
It was not Hugh. It was Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, that's correct.
Yeah, turn 4. Speaking of, Mr. Director obliges, and we switch back to Ryan Thomas.
It was very convenient.
Oh,
what can I say?
I'm less impressed. Trevor Andrisco on board with the Mercedes now. Nikita Ponters is just up ahead of him, and this is the battle for 7th. Trevor Andrisco with, I think, his 4th paint scheme of the season. Or 3rd! He's going to give a shove to the 911 Audi of Nikita Ponters. It was a little unnecessary, but just a little bump and run there, and it's given him the position. Ponters is going to have to defend from Ryan Thomas. Go ahead.
No, just contact between Ponters and Thomas as they made their way onto the home and straight.
Yep, Thomas hung tough on driver's left there and was able to actually complete the move in the braking zone. So the net of all that is Andrisco goes from 8th to 7th, Thomas is up into 8th, and Nikita Ponters drops 2 spots from P7 all the way back to P9.
Pretty much deserved for running 911 on an Audi. That feels like a cursed number choice to me, and he deserves everything he gets for it.
It is almost certainly not his paint scheme, so I think he just chose one and it happened to have a permanent number.
Yeah, but he did pick that number.
Yeah, he didn't. No, the number is in iRacing. He chose that number.
Sure, but the paint scheme had the number on it. It wasn't.
But he's also registered as number 911.
No, I understand.
I think you're making excuses.
Again.
If we're going to be charitable, it looks like Ryan also got a slowdown. At the same place that Alex Gomes got his. If we're going to be charitable, we'll say that he's doing it... Okay, Ryan, what are you doing? Ryan. If we're going to be charitable, we'll say that he's chosen this number as something for first responders, we'll say. Right? Because that's what everybody's been doing these days. That's the cool thing.
Fair.
It's still the wrong car.
Excuse, but it's fair. Yeah, no, that's fine.
I honestly can't remember if he's run it all season. So
he's run it for at least a few rounds.
At least since he's been in the Audi.
Austin Olds' adventures continue as he takes a massive slide through the turn 8 gravel. I think he may have...
and how?
How did he get there?
I think he might have had some help.
Turn 6, incidentally, but now the GT3 Audi looks rather more like a GT4 Audi.
He did have help.
Depending on your angle. Interesting. Dan's had an awfully adventurous couple of races since he joined the USAC Karting Invitational.
Paces he has, yes. It's been a shame not to see him sort of fulfill his potential, I suppose we could say.
Just to back up to the front of the field here, we've ripped through race number 2 at Indy, and with 3 minutes and 13 seconds to go, we've completed 19 laps. And I think for our leader, Nick Rowland, who I will struggle to find on...
He's the one in the front.
No, I understand, but I've clicked the wrong thing in iRacing. There we go. He works his way through IndyCar Turn 1, through the long sweeping right-hander around the oval, and begins what should be his penultimate lap. It'll be this and then one more, and he is 10 seconds clear of Reed Sweeney in second. James French is back in third, and Gomes is in fourth, and I think Gomes, not that it's going to matter, but he's going to fall just short of getting onto the back of James French, at the very least through the slipstream.
Yeah, I'll make this point, which is that we can chalk it up to the slowdown, but he's had about 25 minutes to make up that gap to Reed Sweeney, at least 20, and they've been in lockstep on lap time. So I think this is, if it wasn't how it was going to go without that slowdown, I think it's awfully close.
We've got a really close battle for 7th place. It's the 911 of Nikita Ponaris defending from Trevor Andruscu into turn 1.
Yeah, they've been nose to tail for the better part of 10 minutes now.
Yeah, Trevor, Nikita and Trevor demonstrating that the Audi does have plenty of top end, because Trevor wasn't able to draw alongside despite all of the slipstream. As Nikita makes a little mistake in the double right-hander, and yeah, that was a little bit too tight for Trevor to squeeze his car into, and he's going to take a trip through the grass and end that battle. Let's see if he drops out. Wes Dushak was 8.7 seconds behind.
And there he is.
Losing place. Yeah. He's right. So that's going to be the new battle. 8 for Scoop and Dushak.
Yeah, Nick Rowland now on his final lap, en route to clinching this championship.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable season for Nick Rowland. This will be point scoring win number 5, overall win number 6. Of course, he won our prologue race at Okayama, what was supposed to be week 1, and it's been either feast or famine, really, hasn't it, for Nick? It's like we said, this will be win number 5 if he can complete the lap. He had two other high-scoring points finishes, 75 points and 70, and 3 reasonably poor rounds that have really set him back and taken away any opportunity for a runaway championship win. But he's recovered really, really well, and he's going to get blocked by Justin Atchison. That was nervous moments for Nick Rowland.
All he has to do is not spin out.
Yep, and he's cleared it now, and now he's got the run down the front straightaway. The clock ticks over to 0, and for the final time, Nick Rowland, if all things remain the same, 15 seconds behind him in P4 with Alex Gomes, Nick Rowland is going to be your USAC Karting Invitational eSeries champion. 5 weeks of racing, and Nick Rowland, 6th win, will come through and take the points championship and another $100 towards an entry at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. Behind him, Reed Sweeney comes home in second. James French is just able to hold on from a hard-charging Alex Gomes, P3 and P4. And from where we stood at, well, let's just call it an hour ago, watching Alex Gomes potentially set himself up for a championship run, it must be bitter disappointment for Alex. It was a valiant effort, but up against Nick Rowland's pace, his consistency just not quite enough. And that P4 will be how he completes his USACkarting.com Invitational E-Series campaign.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be gutting, but you can't fault him for trying. I think he threw everything that he could at it. He just didn't have the pace in the end.
No, and if you're going to pinpoint a single mistake all season, that slowdown really seemed to be as bad as it got for Alex, which is remarkable. To pin it down to a 1 second, essentially a 1 second on-track penalty as something that, set you behind the 8 ball a little bit, is really a remarkable comment on Alex's consistency throughout the season. He's done really, really well. But Nick, for pure pace, I think Nick thoroughly deserves this. and it's been a heck of a lot of fun to watch him throughout the season.
Yeah.
Pace, the fact that he's obviously had to be racing at, I haven't even done the time zone maths, but it's very early in the morning where Nick is. So yeah, congratulations on not only the pace and consistency when he hasn't had his Nick Rowland luck, as we were calling it earlier on in the season, but also just turning up for every round at in the time zone again.
Yeah, he was able to wrap up his race twos with 2 straight-up victories at Road Atlanta last week against pretty much every odd, and then again tonight with better odds. I mean, he was clear out in front of the field, but he was in a championship recovery mode from that moment, and he totally delivered on pace, consistency, just lap after lap, totally predictable, and did really, really well under a lot of pressure there from Alex's, 9 races before that.
Oh dear.
Straight away.
You hate to see it.
Sarah.
Never change. Iconic.
Oh, there appears to be one car over the wall, as you see in that.
And we do see that in that.
Anyway, what a way to end the season.
Oh,
on so many levels,
phenomenal.
really.
I think that's appropriate. We've done a reasonably good job all season. We've kept things clean. It's been interesting. It's been entertaining. It's been all the right things at the right moments, especially these last 2 weeks. And I think we can throw a little bit of Lime Rock into our season finale. Why not?
Yeah, it's the spirit of Lime Rock is alive within us all.
Wasn't that the name for the Panos at Britsy that ran at Le Mans a couple years ago?
The spirit of Lime Rock?
The spirit of Lime Rock, yes.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, yeah. I think there was plenty of spirit of Lime Rock between the positions of 10 and 30, if I'm honest, in these races. We were distracted enough by the championship fight to...
Don't tell them, Scott.
I think you're about to show them in a season-ending montage, but yeah, there was... I think
a career-ending montage, depending on who the drivers are.
Or your producer.
Pre-Road Atlanta quality of racing, I think, from 10th on back. But it was good. Yeah, it was good that we got a clean fight amongst the top 10 and amongst the championship protagonists, at least.
Yeah, a little anticlimactic, to be sure, but I think it ended. I think it wound down almost as a foil to how we started. It ended with two or three drivers lapping insanely consistently and not making mistakes. And
it was 4 drivers lapping insanely consistency.
True, and that was the thing that decided the championship. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't people wrecking all over the place. It was people doing laps within a hundredth of each other.
Yeah, who would get that?
Really, it was completely remarkable, and I think a fitting end to the championship. We had all the intrigue of race 1, and then race 2 was, drive as hard as you can, as cleanly as you can, for as long as you can, and obviously all 4 gave it their all. And Alex, it wasn't caused by anything untoward. There was no weirdness. There was no chaos. There was no bad luck. There was no back marker. There was no, rookie iRacing driver. It was none of that. It was just, clean, consistent, inch-perfect driving from everybody. And the end result was, okay, maybe a little anticlimactic from all the chaos of most of the rest of the season. But when it's all said and done, it's one of the joys of racing is watching everybody, give it their all for as long as they can, and it delivered in that respect.
And the critical moment was sort of, in a way, it was appropriate considering what we've been talking about with Alex Gomes all season, which is his consistency and his intelligent, sensible driving. And I felt it'll be interesting to see to hear what he says. I'm sure we'll get to have a word with him, but it felt like he got the slowdown that really cost him the slipstream that cost him the championship. giving a lot of space to Ryan Thomas, which is something that we've commented on repeatedly in the last 3 or 4 races. So it kind of felt appropriate in that way. It certainly wasn't a random incident. It was something characteristic of what we've seen of Gomes throughout the season, as has the runaway victory by Nick Rowland. It's characteristic of what we've seen whenever he's had a clean run throughout the season.
The one thing that wasn't characteristic was, and I'm going to say some words, and I haven't decided how much I believe them. All right, so get ready for this. But maybe the one thing that was most different about this week compared to the others was, where did Nick Rowland start race 2?
Get right up the front.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is his highest race 2 starting position of the season. Looking back to Laguna Seca, he would have started 6th by the looks of things, or maybe 5th. But that's still right in kind of the hornet's nest, especially at a narrow track like Laguna. But we commented before the start of race 2 here that it was all laid out for this is a relatively easy track in terms of lack of chaos. It's nice and long, so there wasn't ever going to be huge amounts of laps traffic. And it was kind of all laid out there for. It was almost a given that Rowland was going to jump into the lead and walk away with this one. So yeah, and that by far the easiest race 2 of his season. Probably pretty familiar for him as far as race 1s go. We saw him win from the front at Road America and Road Atlanta. It's a fair point there, Joseph. He basically reversed his points haul at Road America. He had a 56 in race 1 and 100 in race 2 here, whereas he had 100 in race 1 and a 56 in race 2 at Road America. So it's kind of he set himself up nicely for the easy race 2.
Yeah, probably not how he intended to do it.
Absolutely not. I don't think he intended to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, we questioned earlier in the season whether Alex Lipsky at one point was racing for 10th place to try and get the reverse grid pole. He said at the time that that wasn't what he was doing, and I highly doubt that's what Nick Rowland was doing.
Yeah.
There are more efficient ways of doing it.
You can guarantee, though, that the entire reason he was pushing as hard as he was through the rest of race 1 was to get up to that starting spot for race 2, though.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can get confirmation of that from him at some point.
Just setting ourselves up for a few interviews here.
Don't worry, I'm running us through the litany of lap 1 replays. So.
Yeah, I've been enjoying them. I see them on a bit of a delay, so I haven't been commenting. But yeah, there's plenty of. We saw Alex going through a little gap in the last one there, but.
Yeah, it was a chaotic little lap 1. I got the sense it was a little more chaotic than in race 1.
Let's get started with a couple of these interviews here. There's more than a handful of drivers here tonight, and we'll round out the season talking to the ones that matter. Of course, the participants of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. We'll start with old champ, Nick Rowland, if you're with us.
I am, yeah.
Ah, Nick, congratulations, sir. It was an up-and-down season, especially some of these race 2s, but you absolutely pulled it together when it mattered. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, guys. I greatly appreciate it. I did not make that easy for myself whatsoever with race 1. I slipped the clutch just a bit too early, and I saw the 1 mile hour, 2 mile hour creep up, and I thought, no, that's me a black flag. And sure enough, the moment I moved fully, it gave me a black flag. And unfortunately, with iRacing, it's probably one of the harshest penalties it can give you, because it's a 30-second stop and hold. So I thought to myself, I tried to use the first 3 laps to try and create a gap in the traffic. With it all being very congested, I thought I'd try and gap the front and then come in, which worked out quite well. And then I just had to race my way back. My goal was to get to 10th, as you guys were just saying there. That was 100% my goal, was to get to 10th. I got to 9th. I nearly got 8th, but clearly some good coaching has paid off for Perry, because he kept in front of me. It's a good job. But yeah, other than that, it was very tough race 1. And race 2, I actually recalibrated my clutch for race 2, and I probably got an even better jump off the line than I had been getting in practice. So the launch off the line in race 2 really helped, and then I just tried to settle into a rhythm thereafter.
How much could you play with? Because the traction control's pretty locked down with these setups. How much were you actually able to gain between 1 and 2?
I changed the bite point, so I allowed myself a larger bite point within my clutch. It was probably about 70% to 40% window originally. I increased that to 90% to 40%, so it meant that I could drag the clutch just a little bit longer while just hearing the revs stay up and then releasing it right at the very end. So it basically giving my window of opportunity much larger than what it was.
Your race 2, Nick. We've sort of trialed some of your ups and downs over the course of the season. You were able to pull a race 2 victory together at Rotor Atlanta last weekend against kind of all odds. It was really remarkable the way things wound up there. And this race 2 this week, kind of a culmination of everything that you had potential for over the course of the season, and really just kind of ran away with it at the front. Were you aware of what was happening behind you with regards to Alex being caught back and forth, or once you got out in front, was it pretty much eyes forward and just put in the laps to the end?
I'll be honest, my the bottom right black box in the corner, I had it on the in-car adjustments for 25 minutes because I didn't actually want to know what was going on behind me. I knew that my job was just to win that race. I had to win that race, and then whatever happened behind me, like fate would have it, and it would play out the way it would play out. So it wasn't until about 5 minutes ago that I scrolled through and looked at standings, and I saw Alex in 4th, and I thought that might just be enough. And then I started to do the calculations in my head. I was like, no, focus. So yeah, I thought that might be enough to get him, but I didn't see what happened behind. I saw there was quite a large gap early on, and that Reed had slotted into that gap and it was in second, and he's done an amazing job all season as well as Alex has. But beyond that, I didn't really see what had happened. I think it was James then in 3rd, and then I was flickering between the back markers. I was getting blue lines come up on the screen and blue markers. So I didn't actually know where Alex was for a little bit. Until they'd gone around the back markers. So
we'll pull back now and wrap up with this. Your season as a whole, not exactly the shining example of consistency, and that's nothing to do with your pace, just owing to some really strange luck through the first part of the season. You've come away with $600 towards the entry at next year's SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, which of course we have a date for now, February 27th. Like I said just a couple minutes ago, you're able to really pull things together at the end of the season when it mattered. Are you happy with the way your 5 or 6 week season has turned out here, or do you feel like those first few weeks were a lost opportunity?
A little bit of both, I think. I'm delighted, obviously, to come away with the championship, but it was obviously disappointing how those first few races went. The reverse grids really, I didn't do a good job with them, and Alex very, very much did. He did an amazing job with them, and I had to work on that and work on a bit of traffic management and things like that as well. So I was a little bit disappointed with the first couple, even though I picked up a win or two. My overall feeling was I could have done better. But then I got to Road Atlanta and geez, it just came alive. I couldn't believe like the double there. And I went in tonight. I put a fair bit of effort in for coming into tonight, and then I just couldn't believe I slipped the clutch in race 1. So I knew I was under a heck of a lot of pressure going into race 2. And at the start of the warm-up session, the 20-minute warm-up session, I was trying to put some consistency together early on and try and get some clean laps in, and then practice the starts. So I had a bit of a game plan in my head of what I needed to do in race 2, and thankfully that jump off the line is really what got it.
Well, Nick, congratulations again, and thanks for being a part of this season. I know it's very early in the morning for you over there, or very late at night, depending on how you do your math. But we really appreciate you being a part of it, and it's been a lot of fun to watch you and and Alex and Reed, especially at the top of the championship, go for it like you have. So congratulations again.
Big thank you to you guys as well. Yeah, thank you to all you guys as well for the broadcast, and TJ and Jason. Everyone's done an amazing job. It is 2:30 in the morning. I'm looking forward to trying to sort my body clock out again now. So, but to Alex and Reed, massive well done. Really, really well done, guys.
Thanks for that, Nick. Really appreciate you being a part of this. And I think the most appropriate thing, if Alex Gomes is still with us, is to pivot back over to him. And first, Alex, it may not be what you want, but congratulations. Second in the championship, especially up against the competition you were, is no mean feat.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's been a hell of a series, and I am a little gutted, I'll admit. I didn't think I was gonna. I just came into this night like, it's just a sim race for funsies, woohoo! But then, I don't know. You always win in the moment, so no bad blood to Nick at all. You rocked it, dude. You were definitely the fastest guy. Your consistency was a little wishy-washy, but I think Brendan said it best when it was due to some really, really weird luck. But to finish second to you, I mean, I'll take it for now, man. It was a really, really great run all season.
You, Alex, I think are the poster child for consistency over the course of the season. You look at your results, and no finish worse than I think 70 points on the whole season. Your two dropped races are better than a whole lot of drivers were able to achieve over the course of the season. I mean, really, really remarkable stuff. You said going into tonight that it's a sim race, it's all for fun. You were able to get a win out of it, and that win sort of put you in the driver's seat with regards to the championship. Midway through the night, did you have yourself thinking that there was a chance here, or was it just a matter of business as usual? Let's get the results we can and see how things shake out.
Oh no, I definitely thought I had a shot, and I did not do the math in between races. So question for you guys, I'm assuming you did do the math in between the races. Let's say Nick did finish first. Where did I have to finish to keep the lead? Do you guys know? Yeah,
you would have had to have ended up second. You were 14 points out in front after race one. I think 6:15 to 6:01. So
yeah.
Even if you had gotten James for P3, you would have ended up, I think, 6 points short there of Nick. So it would have been P1 and P2 for you guys.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And it sucks because I'm sure you guys saw it. I was trying to go on the inside of Alex Slepsky, I believe, into turn one of those laps, and I ended up getting a course cut penalty.
We saw that, and we didn't want to identify it as a championship-changing moment at the time, but if it didn't cost you a position as such, it seemed like maybe that dropped you out of the slipstream of James and Reed, and that might have been enough just to put you off the back.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. What did I finish? Like 2.5 seconds behind James? And that's what the penalty was for, 2.5 seconds. So it makes you think. And I know James was up there with Reed, fighting for a little bit, and then he dropped about 2 seconds behind him or so. And all three of us had the exact same pace, it seemed. It always seemed like James was 2.2 to 2.5 ahead of me, and every time I looked at Reed's name, it was always like 6.1, 6.2. So it's really incredible how consistently the same... We were all just doing the same times consistently. Just goes to show you how close this fixed setup stuff can get.
Quite literally the same times. I think there was a lap where you, James, and Reed, I think it was a 1:26, and then like you did a 4:03, James did a 4:03, and Reed did like a 4:04 or something like that. It was absolutely ridiculous, all in the same lap. But it was a nice little way to kind of encapsulate the season. There, you and Reed and Nick in particular had separated yourselves out in the front of the field these last couple races. The racing got better, it got cleaner, it got more interesting, and it allowed the championship to play out in a way, at least to those of us sitting on the sidelines, in a way I think it deserved to play out, which was clean and down to you guys doing your job as drivers, right? Which is clean and exciting and as fast as you can go over the course of a half-an-hour race. With that said, it's a full season, right? We had 6 weeks of this if you include the pre-race or the preseason race at Okayama. When you take a step back, much like I asked Nick, are you pleased? I know second isn't exactly where you want to end the championship, particularly with where things were at after race one. Or not would you have wanted more, but do you think more was deserved, I guess is a way to ask that question.
If more was deserved, I don't think so. I think I might have been the cleanest guy that ran up front all season, from what I observed anyway. So I can't really say that, if I didn't get hit by this guy, or if that guy didn't, I don't think that has anything to do with really any of my results this season. So as far as deserving more, no. I think I could have done better early on. There were plenty of silly slip-ups on my end. I remember specifically going into a corner in Laguna Seca with just like one of my rear wheels off the edge, and I spun it right around, and it's like, I could have gained positions from that one, and especially when the championship got to be this close, I think back to those moments and just been like, if I didn't spin it at Laguna, or if I didn't get, if I didn't do that thing at Lime Rock, sure. That's what I keep thinking of. But I think as far as the end of my season has gone, quite happy with it. A few times where I was just able to stay consistent and just gain positions purely by that. I remember going into Canada Corner at Road America and Reed getting a little bit on the outside of the grass there, losing it, and me taking a spot. So it's little things like that that make all the difference, man. So, but it's been a hell of a season, and I'm glad to get 2 wins out of it. That's pretty cool. Overall happy with myself, but of course there's always that voice in the back of your head that's like, you didn't win it though.
Well, and again, whether this is sim racing or a fun way to spend a couple of Wednesday nights, you're still a competitor, and in the heat of the moment, especially as you get towards the end of a championship, you realize there's something on, or chances on for a championship when you're going to go after it with everything you can. It's been great having you a part of the series. A second place, certainly nothing to sneeze at. It was a great run to the end with you and Nick and Reed. And congratulations again on the championship finish. And look forward to, maybe we can do this again through this. And if nothing else, there's, you've got $200 towards your entry at Orlando next year. So, really happy to have you a part of all this, and congratulations again. Yes.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, TJ, Jason, for putting this on. Thank you guys for doing the broadcast. You guys are phenomenal, by the way. Like, I rewatch the races, and it's like, what goes on in my head? You guys announce it, and it's like, Jesus, they're paying that much attention. And also, one last shout out to Josh Bezio and all the guys at Black Glove Courier Services. Very much appreciate their support that they've given to me throughout the last 4 weeks of this competition.
Well, thanks, Alex, again, and appreciate it. And I'm sure opportunities to race in the future. We've enjoyed being a part of this, and if there's more opportunities with USAC karting and the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, we're more than happy to be a part of that moving forward as well. Let's get Blake McCord next. Blake, you call yourself the best of the rest, but P5 sitting behind Roland, Sweeney, French, and Gomes is not a bad way to round out the season.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Best of the rest might be a stretch at that, but looking at the results from last race, I mean, everyone else was in the 25s. I think I was pretty much where I should have been 5th after, which was a surprise after a terrible first race. So, good way to end the season at least.
You've ended up, I think you're going to wind up in 4th in the championship, possibly 5th. Which has been, roughly your pace all season. You had the win, of course, at Lime Rock, which got you $100 towards an entry at SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando for next year. Overall, happy with the way the season has turned out?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. When we started, I was probably targeting, top 10, be a good night for me. So to, end up, ideally around 5th place or so pace-wise, definitely take that better than expected. I've only been doing iRacing at least for 2 months now. Been doing console forever and race go-karts, but definitely surprised to step on iRacing and be competitive with guys like these. That's for sure.
Well, we we talked about with Nick and Alex. It's been a great great addition to the series. We've really enjoyed kind of following, your trials and tribulations over the course of the season. You've got a couple of really good results to show for it, a couple of podiums in there as well. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. Certainly been a great championship opportunity. We'll see where your results shake out. In any case, you sound, well, as pleased as you can anyway. I know it's a sim race, but like we said, we're all competitors here. So you sound overall fairly pleased.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. Trust me, after race one, got flying start. I think I was up to second battling with Alex, and then just locked the rears going into turn four. Took myself out. Kind of same old story for race one for me, but kept in it thanks to my solid racing engineer yelling at me in the background, my better half, and came back and worked my way up in the second race. So I'm pleased with that. Good way to represent Bushnell Motorsports and Bois Racing team. Looking forward to get some real racing out there this weekend there.
Yeah, we saw that in the Discord there, racing this weekend at Bushnell Motorsports Park down in Florida. Glad to have some racing back. I know Florida has given the opportunity for some motorsports and in particular karters. So, go enjoy that. It's been fun having you over the last couple of weeks. And, if nothing else, hopefully we'll get to see you at the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando next year to follow on with some of our USAC karting stuff.
Absolutely.
So we look forward to that. Credit. Really look forward to it, Blake, and thanks again for joining us this season.
Hey, thanks for the great broadcast, guys. Like Alex said, I'm going to go watch the broadcast afterwards like I have the rest of the races, and it really is incredible, what you guys pick up on there. So great job.
Well, you can go watch Joseph and Scott show me up again like they tend to do week after week. We'll go to Nikita Ponaris next. Nikita, as I look up and down the list, P7 for race 2. That's not so bad. It was a little up and down there for a while, but the result was there in the end.
Yeah, it was a great race. I was happy to finally come back after a rough, not too great 2 weeks that went by, but happy to come with 7th place.
It was, let's talk about your race one. Obviously, we had some championship implications to focus on at the top of the field. But you were, like you said, able to recover back to a 7th in race 2. What was your race one like this evening?
It was pretty good. We had a little incident. I got a good start, and around lap 5, we were going into turn 1, and I forget who was behind me, but they just misjudged the corner by a bit and tapped me, and I went around. I went back to like 18th and was able to make my way back up to 12th by the end of it.
It's like you said, we're kind of, well, you didn't get the advantage of any of the invert from race one, obviously. So you started 12th, came back up to 7th. It looked like a pretty solid little battle. I forget who all was involved there. I think Hugh North was in there, Trevor Andrisco, maybe Wes Duchak there for a while. Sort of an angry pack of 5 or 6 of you guys there fighting for part of the mid-race.
Yeah, it was a great battle throughout the whole race. We had, I think, at most a 6-car pack there with quite a few people, and it was some great racing throughout the whole race.
Well, I appreciate you joining us tonight, Nikita, and, having had the opportunity over the course of the season, I remember some of your race 2s. You'd start back in something like 25th or 30th, and then all of a sudden we'd look up and you'd be in the top 10 of the end of race 2. So it's been fun to watch that over the course of the season. You've certainly given us plenty to talk about, and, well done on your results, and in particular, wherever your championship position shakes out here at the end. I think you were, not sure where you were, 18th coming into tonight, but you've certainly given us plenty to talk about, and we've been entertained by it. So, thanks for being a part of this. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you guys for the great broadcasting throughout the whole season. It's been amazing. Like Alex and Blake said, you guys are great. I'm going to go watch it after this. And thanks to TJ and Jason also for the great work.
We'll add our own thank yous, but your sentiments are absolutely well, maybe the most important thing we can say all night is thanks to TJ and to Jason and everybody in Race Control. It's been an awesome run over the last couple of weeks. We'll finish up tonight with an interview with our good friend Trevor Andrisco. We'll need to unmute himself here in just a moment. Trevor, let's see. I'm going to pick out your finishing position here for race 2. It's P8.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to say. It seemed like there was a little damage to the car there at the end. We were taken with some of the stuff happening up at the front of the field, but it wasn't a boring race, I guess.
No, it kind of a repeat of last week. Fought up to P3 in race 1, got caught out by a slower car that spun, and then whoever was in front of me, I guess, went to avoid it. I wasn't looking, went right into the back of them. Physics on iRacing probably turned that into a bigger incident than it needed to be, but a penalty, and then started 20th, I think, for race 2, and then drove it up to 7th or 8th. So it was definitely a hectic race 2, just trying to stay competitive, and awesome battle the whole way through, especially with Nikita. Probably got a little too close to him at one point, just trying to crowd him, and apologize for that, but we both recovered and had a good race from there until the end.
We looking back through some of your championship results, you had the podium at race 2 at Lime Rock, which was itself sort of an outlier. We saw race 1 at Road Atlanta. Your pace has been there more or less throughout the course of the season. Just a couple little errors, or maybe getting caught up in some incidents that weren't necessarily your fault. Are you happy with the way the season's turned out, or has it been an exercise in frustration knowing that your pace has more or less been there?
It's definitely been frustrating. I think I've kind of proven that the pace is there. Tonight was interesting because I've been working with the guys at Simcraft and drove tonight on their Apex 6-axis motion simulator with a new prototype brake pedal that we've been developing that basically simulates a real car. So if you look back through race 2, that's probably the most consistent I've ever been on a simulator, because I can actually pitch the car appropriately. So that definitely took a little bit of relearning. On top of that, I only got about 30 minutes of practice this week. So, race 1 was an interesting experience.
Is it so? Speaking to Simcraft and of course, series partners with the 24 Hours of Orlando, does it make a difference when you're putting laps in? Right. I mean, I sit in an office chair, right, and I race at a desk, and there's no real rigidity there. You have rigidity in the rig,
like
but the rig is moving constantly.
Well, and that's kind of the interesting thing. At home, I'm on a G27 and no motion and a TV instead of a monitor and stock pedals. So that's kind of what I've been racing all season with. And then tonight, jumping in it, I wouldn't say I'm much faster, but I'm a lot more consistent, and it feels a lot more like the real car. I will also say that I'm much more mentally drained tonight than I've been throughout the entirety of the season, just because there's so much more sensory inputs that are there.
That's fascinating. I've never had the opportunity to be in one, but the idea of just jumping from something like a G27 setup on a TV into a full straight up six axis or 6 degrees of freedom rig, it would totally blow my mind. And to jump in like that, and then for your pace to be more or less right there, jumping in for one race at the end of the season is really, really impressive.
Yeah, it was. I wish it were probably a little bit cleaner. I'm apparently a bit of a penalty magnet, so that's been kind of hovering for at least the second half of the season. So hopefully that gets cleared up a little bit. But overall, I think it was a great season once everybody kind of figured out how to sim race again. These last 2 races have been pretty clean. For the most part, and the racing, I'm pretty proud of where this series has gone. So thanks to TJ and everybody on that side of it, and huge thanks to the guys at Simcraft and everybody at Track 9 and Kingpin.
Well, I appreciate you joining us tonight, Trevor. And
as everybody else has said, I'm going to echo it. You guys have been phenomenal on the broadcast side.
entirely too kind, Trevor. We really appreciate it, but we've had great content to work with. The racing has been exciting, fascinating in some regards, but always compelling. And we've really enjoyed being able to be a part of this over the last couple of weeks. So thanks again for joining us, and hopefully be able to do this again when the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando rolls around next February.
Absolutely, looking forward to the next one and the 24 hour.
All right, appreciate it, Trevor. So with that being said, I don't think anybody else has anything to say. Everybody's left.
All right, bye.
Tired of me talking to other people, which is fair. So I really have nothing else to say other than to wrap this up. I'm gonna leave you two with the last word. I'm gonna get my thoughts out of the way first, which is not the way this is usually done. I think watching the progression over the course of the season has been fascinating in the best possible way. I mean, we watched the pre-race or the preseason race at Okayama. It was supposed to be race 1. Fuel settings didn't work out. Ended up scrapping it, which was, in terms of the competition, it was the right call. And we moved on and did something else. And we added another race at the end of the season. We got our 5 races in. Lime Rock was chaos. It was always going to be chaos. And we moved forward from that. We went to Laguna Seca. It got better. Road America was more interesting yet, and the racing got better. Then we got to Road Atlanta last week, and it was everything the series could have been or should have been, if not for, guys who have never run iRacing before, drivers who are used to karts, people getting, new sim racing rigs, new wheels, all kinds of things, right? But everything came together in the right competitive setting last week at Road Atlanta to deliver the type of racing that I think we could have expected over the course of any, sim racing season-long effort. And it was awesome to watch. This weekend was an absolute reflection of that, or this week, I guess, was an absolute reflection of that. Indy was awesome. It suited the GT3 as well. It was fun to watch. It was competitive, and it threw us a storyline for the championship right at the end with Nick's unforced error at the start of race 1 that really just, it set everything up just right. Race 2, okay, it wasn't, climactic. It didn't deliver that sort of Game 7, do or die moment. But it was a race, and it was clean, and it didn't involve anything weird. There was no sim racing weirdness, no netcode, anything like that. It was just a great race with drivers going at it absolutely, from the word go for the last half an hour. I've always said one of my favorite races of all time, 2011 NASCAR Championship decider. It was Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards going for the championship, P1, P2, for 100 laps at the end under green. And they were inch perfect. Every single lap, every single corner. 100 times they went around. Nobody gained on anybody. Nobody lost any time. It was perfection for half an hour, and it was awesome. And I think that's the way race 2 kind of turned up. Maybe a little error from Alex that cost him a shot at the championship, but Nick was finally inch perfect. Reed Sweeney was awesome. James French was right there on pace. Alex, apart from the error, was, bang on for the pace he was capable of. And what we saw, maybe not the closest on-track action, but for the championship, it was the best of every one of those drivers, what they had to offer. And as a championship finale, I couldn't have asked for more. So I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being a part of this and being able to represent DriversEye Live, represent SimCraft, represent PMG Promotions, and of course USAC Karting. It's been a real joy over the last 6 weeks. And, if the opportunity is there in the future, I'd love to continue and do something like this again, because this is totally, over the course of a season anyway, has totally outweighed my expectations. Joseph, I'll throw it to you to your final thoughts.
They grow up so fast, don't they?
They do. They really do.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was. I'll echo a lot of what you were saying, which is the first race was a crapshoot. I mean, to call a spade, it was basically a random draw. Some of the cream rose to the top, but not all of it. A lot of people had really rough races that weren't so much the victims of luck after that, right? By the time we got to round 5, or round 6, depending on how you like to count, 5 plus 1, everything had kind of settled out. People had more or less hung around. There were some dumb mistakes and racing incidents here for this round too. But it wasn't crazy. It wasn't like you look left and you look right and someone was up in the air upside down. At least not until everyone had crossed the finish line. So it's such a it's almost a relief, because I think we came out of the first race and we're like, oh no, these are all going to be insane, right? We're going to have to go to counseling after this to try to understand what we've been through. But by round 2, it had gotten a little better. By round 3, it had gotten incrementally better. You can actually, I think, even see this in... So as we were upgrading graphics, we started to introduce graphical indicators for drivers' license classes, right? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you go back to round 3, you'll actually see a lot of people have progressed up through the license classes a bit. It just goes to show the amount of time that people have actually spent on this, people who were totally green to iRacing. I think TJ had said that he actually got maybe 6 or 7 at least people registered to iRacing. So green, had never done it before. And now you've got these people in C licenses or better who are competing for wins, not necessarily getting them, but they're in the fight. They're making a real difference. And so for the last race to be down to not random chance and getting taken out, but actually coming down to, can you stay consistent for 30 minutes without taking each other out, without doing something silly? And that's what we got. I think that's such a huge sea change from how we started this season. It's been really cool to see.
I can only agree. Not to leave it, too vague, but I mentioned the growth. You've mentioned the growth of drivers. It's been obvious and such a big part of the season. Scott, the most experienced in iRacing out of all of us, certainly the most experienced in these GT3 cars, and the most knowledgeable going into the season. Your closing thoughts on what we saw starting back from Okayama to the conclusion in Indy tonight.
Well, you guys have done a great job of wrapping up the whole season, so I'll keep it brief and keep it to kind of on the racing side what we saw tonight. And it's sport, so I would never, unlike certain sporting outlets, I would never want to manufacture a really like Game 7 moment for every championship. But we got a really good, solid end to the championship race here. Because it wasn't manufactured, we really didn't know how it was going to go, and I don't think any of us would have predicted before race 1 how it did end up going. So that was really interesting. It was engaging. It's good to see, and I'm really glad it came down to. I mean, I don't want this to sound as bad as it does, but I'm glad it came down to one of our protagonists making their own mistake, and that's what decided it. It wasn't random draw. It wasn't someone spinning in a reverse top 10 thing. It wasn't a dodgy move by someone who wasn't involved in the championship, or even a dodgy move by somebody who was involved in the championship. It was just part of the racing. It was part of the narrative we've seen all season. Obviously, I'm referring to Alex Gomes getting his slowdown penalty, and I think, and it came down to those two drivers had a job to do. Nick had to go out and win the race. Alex had to come from 10th to 2nd. Nick did his job. Alex didn't quite manage it. And it was kind of one mistake. So I think that's a really great conclusion to a championship. But the thing that's really struck me the most about the USAC karting series as a whole is how many drivers we've had here from week 1 to week, whatever we're on, 5 or 6 now. It depends how you count Okayama. They've all been here. They've all been keen. We've seen them improving slowly, but they've got all the drivers all the way through the top 20 have had characteristics that the three of us have been able to pick out and identify them as their driving characteristics and their racing characteristics the whole way through the season, which just shows that they're obviously putting in decent effort. They're not just showing up and just driving around and crashing. These are guys who care about racing their karting contemporaries, care almost as if it was a real race. That said, this hasn't gone down. I don't think this has gone down as like a replacement for USAC karting. It's been its own thing, and it's hopefully everyone's really enjoyed it. Hopefully it can be something that happens more regularly. I think personally, I'm obviously, as you've mentioned, I'm a big iRacer. I've been we've all been sim racing for a long time, but I'm possibly the guy who's carried on the longest. But so I'm a big fan of the platform. But I think it's something that can really find its place in an off season amongst real racing. So hopefully this is something that becomes a bit more regular for these guys and other similar outlets, because we've seen a community of racers here have a really good time over 5 or 6 weeks, something they can really care about, but at the same time the stakes are low enough that it's just good fun. And yeah, we've all had a great time and really enjoyed it. So I'm very pleased for that.
Well, with all that being said, I guess the decision for the future is up to DJ, BMG Promotions, USAC Karting, and all of the partners involved. It's been a mega effort from everybody on all season. DJ, of course, Jason Burgess in race control, Dave Dusick spent some time in race control as well, and put a lot of effort in over the course of the season to make this what it was. It's been a fantastic effort from everybody involved. I hope that we at DriversEye Live have been able to do it justice. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great way to spend some Wednesday nights, some really great racing, and fun to watch this series evolve and the drivers evolve and get better at sim racing, something that, the three of us, Joseph, myself, and Scott, have put a lot of time into and care very much about as a hobby, and at least for the last couple of weeks anyway, a quote-unquote emotional replacement maybe for the racing that we invest ourselves in the real world. So with all that being said, to everybody who's had a hand in the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries, been absolutely fantastic to be a part of. Really appreciate the opportunity to do that. To everybody who's watched, gone back and watched after the races, and been a part of the interviews and the community effort that the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries became has just been fantastic, and appreciate everybody's time and energy and kind words over the course of the season. I don't know when the next chance we'll have to do this is, but until then, we look forward to it. Maybe the Battle at the Brickyard, which has just had a date change. Keep an eye out for that at USAC Karting. The SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando in 2021, if we should be so lucky, at DriversEye Live. The opportunity to come together as a racing community again can't come soon enough, and we really appreciate it, everybody, over the course of the season. So with that being said, for myself, Brendan Kazmarek, Joseph Mudrak, Scott Michaels joined me over the course of the season, TJ in race control and all the support he's offered over the last 6 weeks as well. It's been really wonderful to have you all along for the ride, and can't wait for the next time. So for now then, take care, and we'll see you in the future.